Buongiorno a tutti. Welcome to everybody. Nice to have so many people in this room. Hope the trip was not too difficult. Thank you for coming. This is a conference on the Balkans and the Black Sea, and it is a normal focus of our foundation, as many people in the room know, because the region is obviously very important from a strategic point of view, from historic point of view, whatever, and it also has a difficult and fragmented history, but it has been promised to become part of the European Union already many years ago. And NATO, on its side, has applied the so-called open door policy, projecting security and peace in the region. The war in Ukraine takes place since more than 4 years and is a further incentive for inclusion on our side. And now we have entered in a critical phase because negotiations are seriously underway, and I believe that some of them may be concluded in a couple of years. And the people from the region can perhaps say something about that later. And in the region, we should see the end of a sense of frustration which has been there for many years because of a long journey finally going to destination, hopefully. Here, of course, from this foundation, we are looking at things from a security point of view. But also, we have to say the representation of security is rapidly changing. Traditional conflicts remain possible, of course, but new avenues are opening with blended threats involving directly the civil society. And I'm speaking of cognitive challenges, disinformation, illicit networks and trade, the use of artificial intelligence for political influence, and I would like to name especially the Russian Federation, still believing that the region can be influenced and trying to revive in covert ways using disinformation, old stories. We see, however, in the region a vibrant society, a youth that has aspirations to be better recognized. And of course, for my friends, I would recall that Bulgaria has adopted the single European currency at the beginning of the year. So there are many good things happening. NATO and the European Union will continue to support such a direction, each one of its own added value. And I recall the traditional force in Kosovo, KFOR, and the operation underway in Bosnia and Herzegovina. In conclusion, we are convinced that the Balkan and Black Sea region is a successful story. Nonetheless, we have the task to accompany this movement with conviction, supporting reforms and analyzing emerging dangerous threats, as I said before, and the damage that they can inflict. This is why today we are here to discuss in an open, scientific and friendly way the strategic scenario as some of its facets. We have been doing this for more than a decade with attention and respect, and we consider these issues to be a priority. To prove this, I would like to point out the fact that we are celebrating at the Foundation this month the 100th issue of our Balkan Journal. This is a Balkan Journal in English, published every month, devoted to the region and unique in its format. I thank from my heart, of course, all the new friends who have accepted our invitation to come to Rome today as speakers and moderators, as well as the public. Many thanks go, obviously, and of course, to our sponsors, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Italy, ICID, the Compagnia di San Paolo, CSF, and our media partners. And I thank you for your attention, and I wish you a very good afternoon. Buon pomeriggio a tutti.
Ladies and gentlemen, Excellencies, dear colleagues and friends. It is an honor for me to speak today at this conference dedicated to the Balkans and the Black Sea region. First of all, I would like to thank the NATO Defense College Foundation, as well as partners and speakers gathered here today for this significant initiative in the current strategic context. The Western Balkans and the wider Black Sea region continue to represent an essential strategic area for the Euro-Atlantic community, where issues of security, democratic governance, and regional stability are now deeply connected. For more than 20 years, NATO has remained engaged in this region. This commitment has been shown concretely through the presence of KFOR in Kosovo since 1999, but also through constant political dialogue, support for defense reforms, and stronger cooperation with regional partners. Today, however, the challenges are changing rapidly. Threats are no longer limited to traditional forms of conflict. Disinformation campaigns, cyber attacks, foreign interference, and hybrid strategies are gradually weakening democratic institutions and citizens' trust. The emergence and rapid development of artificial intelligence are accelerating this transformation even further. Digital tools now make it possible to conduct influence operations on a large scale, quickly, at low cost, and sometimes in ways that are difficult to detect. Information manipulation and forms of cognitive warfare are therefore becoming major instruments of strategic competition. In this context, cognitive security is becoming a central issue for our democracies. It is no longer about protecting territories or critical infrastructures, but also about preserving the integrity of information, the quality of public debate, and the ability of our societies to resist manipulations and polarization. In the Balkans, these issues have a specific importance. The history of the region reminds us how political, ethnic, or informational division can seriously weaken regional stability over time. This is why strengthening democratic resilience must now be a collective priority. This resilience depends, of course, on security institutions, but also on education, independent media, regional cooperation, the development of analytical capacities, and early warning tools against hybrid threats. In this field, NATO continues its concrete and constant engagement. In Kosovo, the KFOR mission continues to contribute to a safe and secure environment for all communities. In Bosnia and Herzegovina, the alliance supports defense reform, political dialogue, and institutional cooperation. Across the Western Balkans, NATO is developing partnerships in cybersecurity, institutional resilience, the fight against disinformation, and preparedness for new technological threats. But no single actor can respond to these challenges alone. Democratic resilience is above all a collective responsibility. It requires close cooperation between international institutions, government, researchers, civil society, the private sector, and younger generation, which you did this morning, Sarah. This is exactly why this conference is so important. Through discussions between decision makers, experts, researchers, and practitioners, we are helping to develop a common understanding of emerging challenges linked to artificial intelligence, information integrity, and cognitive security. The NATO Defense College and the Foundation play an essential role there. Through training, strategic dialogue, and academic exchange, we help prepare a new generation of leaders able to understand and anticipate the complex challenges of the 21st century. Ladies and gentlemen, the Balkans and the Black Sea region should not be seen only as areas of vulnerability. They also represent areas of cooperation, resilience, innovation, and opportunity for the entire Euro-Atlantic community. In an international environment marked by uncertainty and strategic competition, preserving the stability of these regions and strengthening their democratic resilience remain more than ever a shared priority. Thank you.
Good afternoon, distinguished guests, colleagues, and friends. It is my honor to welcome you to today's conference. I would also like to thank NATO Defense College Foundation, Ambassador Alessandro Minotto-Rizzo, and Alessandro Politi on behalf of ICEED for the invitation. We are here today through the joint commitment of the institutions united by a shared purpose, strengthening stability, security, and democratic resilience across one of Europe's most strategically significant regions. The Western Balkans and the wider Black Sea region stand at a pivotal moment. As highlighted in the conference concept, this region forms a critical strategic interface for the Euro-Atlantic community, shaped by EU enlargement and NATO's open door policy. These processes, by nature, have long supported political convergence, institutional reform, and the consolidation of democratic governance. Yet, their uneven pace and increasingly politicization have also created openings for geopolitical competition and hybrid interference. Today, the long-term consequences of the war in Ukraine, persistent great power rivalry, and the intensification of hybrid threats are reshaping the regional security landscape. As the concept note reminds us, the region remains highly vulnerable to both domestic and foreign information manipulation and interference due to fragile media ecosystems, low institutional trust, and limited analytical capacity. These vulnerabilities are not abstract. They directly affect democratic legitimacy, social cohesion, and the region's Euro-Atlantic trajectory. Compounding these challenges is the rapid diffusion of artificial intelligence. AI is transforming the information environment at unprecedented speed, amplifying the scale and sophistication of cognitive warfare. As noted in the document, AI now enables low-cost, high-impact manipulation while complicating attribution and response. This reality demands that we rethink how we build resilience, not only in institutions, but also in societies, media ecosystems, and civic culture. Against this backdrop, today's conference serves three essential objectives. First, it provides a platform to examine evolving NATO and EU strategies in the Western Balkans, strategies that must remain coherent, coordinated, and insightful if they are to effectively support stability and democratic consolidation. Second, it brings together experts, practitioners, and young researchers to explore the transformation of the information environment in the AI era. This includes hybrid threats, cognitive security, and the pressures placed on democratic institutions by increasingly sophisticated manipulation campaigns. Third, it aims to generate practical outcomes, targeted policy recommendations, enhanced knowledge sharing, and the strengthening of a regional network dedicated to information integrity and democratic resilience. As the concept emphasizes, strengthened NATO-EU cooperation remains essential to ensure coherent and effective responses. I want to extend my gratitude to all speakers, contributors, and participants, especially the young researchers and practitioners who joined the Future Lab this morning. Your insight and emerging expertise are indispensable to shaping the next generation of policy solutions. As we begin this high-level conference, let us approach our discussions with clarity and a shared sense of responsibility. The challenges before us are complex, but the collective expertise in this room and the commitment of our institutions gives us confidence that meaningful progress is not only possible, but also within reach. Thank you for being here, and I wish you all a productive and inspiring afternoon of dialogue and collaboration. Thank you.
Well, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure and an honor to me to address you today on behalf of Fondazione Compagnia di San Paolo and to contribute to the opening of this conference. First of all, let me thank the NATO Defense College, together with all partners, for convening this timely and important dialogue. Fondazione Compagnia di San Paolo is one of Europe's oldest and largest philanthropic institutions with more than 460 years of history. Our long-standing mission is to promote social, cultural, scientific and economic development through strategic philanthropy, institutional partnership, and innovation-driven initiatives. Today, we are engaged in a large-scale, cross-sectors and multi-stakeholder initiatives in Italy and abroad, spanning education ecosystems, scientific diplomacy, sustainable development, cultural heritage, innovation, climate, and international cooperation. The plurality of thematic areas is not incidental. It is, in fact, a driver of our strategic plan 2025-2028, and it is also a driver of our internationalization process. The ability to connect institutions and diverse stakeholders to facilitate innovation across economic, technological, cultural, and social domain enable us to open new and original perspectives, first and foremost for the benefit of the territories in which we operate. Internationalization for us is a strategic lever. It allows us to strengthen transnational cooperation, attract resources and competencies, and foster collaborative models integrating public, private, philanthropic, and partnership dimensions, an approach that is essential to addressing complex and global challenges. We are living in a time of profound transformation, marked by geopolitical tensions, technological acceleration, and increasing challenges to democratic system. In this context, the Balkan Sea region represents a crucial space where resilience, security, and cooperation intersect. The focus on democratic resilience, artificial intelligence, and cognitive security could not be more timely. These are challenges that require not only technological solutions, but also collaboration, trust, and shared understanding across borders and sectors. This is precisely why this initiative is so valuable, because initiatives like this create the condition for meaningful dialogue among policymakers, experts, practitioners, and young researchers. Let me conclude with a simple reflection. In times of uncertainty, investing in knowledge, dialogue, and cooperation is not only necessary, it is a responsibility. Fondazione Compagnia di San Paolo is proud to contribute to this collective effort and to support initiatives and think tanks that connect global challenges with local impact. Thank you very much, and I wish you a productive and inspiring conference.
Dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you can hear me well in the room. Excellencies and ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure to welcome you to this high-level conference organized by the NATO Defense College Foundation and dedicated to one of the most pressing challenges facing the Euro-Atlantic community today, the resilience, as it was said, and the security of the information environment in a time of growing geopolitical uncertainty and systemic competition. The CSF Foundation, that I have the honor of representative as the executive director, is the advisor on international affairs of the Fondazione Compagnia di San Paolo. The foundation was established back in 2000 by the Fondazione Compagnia di San Paolo and the University of Torino, the University of Pavia, University of Milano, and the Polytechnic University of Turin. The CSF Foundation operates as a policy-oriented think tank promoting interdisciplinary research, information, and documentation activities on topics of international relations, geopolitics, and European integration in synergies, of course, with university, research centers, public institutions, and private entities at national and international level. Over the recent past, we have launched a number of significant activities that are very relevant with regards to both the topic and the region addressed in today's conference, including our recent Nexus project, the Italian hub on hybrid threats, but also our work to support an international network on science diplomacy with the University of Torino, and our whole area of work dedicated to the interconnection between geopolitics and technology. At the same time, we are also very active in the Balkan region, thanks, for instance, to our multi-annual cooperation established with the College of Europe, and in particular, their campus in Tirana, in Albania. The Western Balkans and the wider Black Sea region stand, in fact, at a critical strategic crossroads, as it was already highlighted by the previous speaker. These regions are essential to the stability, security, cohesion of the broader Euro-Atlantic area. At the same time, they remain particularly exposed to geopolitical pressure, hybrid threats, and external influence operations that seek to exploit societal vulnerabilities and undermine democratic resilience. In this evolving landscape, the information environment has become a central arena for strategic competition. Disinformation, foreign information manipulation and interference, cyber-enabled influence campaign, and cognitive warfare are increasingly used to weaken public trust, to polarize societies, and challenge democratic governance. These dynamics are not new, of course, but they are becoming more sophisticated and more persistent, I would say, definitely more difficult to detect. The rapid diffusion of artificial intelligence is thus accelerating this transformation. AI technologies offer enormous opportunities for innovation and societal progress, but they also create new risks. Synthetic media, deepfakes, automated propaganda, and AI-generated disinformation are reshaping the way information is produced, is distributed, and consumed. The ability to manipulate narratives at speed and scale poses serious implications for democratic institutions, electoral integrity, and strategic stability. This is why our discussion today is both timely and necessary. The challenges we are facing can no longer be addressed through isolated and purely national responses, as it was highlighted. They require stronger coordination among allies and partners, deeper cooperation among institutions, and a shared strategic understanding of how the information environment is actually evolving. In this context, NATO and the European Union have an increasingly important role to play. Both organizations have recognized that resilience, including societal and informational resilience, is now a fundamental component of collective security. Over the course of the conference, we will examine three key dimensions of this challenge. The evolving role of NATO and the EU in supporting regional stability and resilience, the implication of hybrid threats, cognitive warfare, and FIMI dynamics in the AI-enabled information space, and the protection of democratic institutions together with the strengthening of information integrity. Our objective is not only to assess risk, but also to try to identify practical avenues for enhanced cooperation. The participation of senior representatives from allied and partner countries, European institutions, academia, and leading experts reflects the importance of a comprehensive and multidisciplinary approach. The governments alone cannot address these challenges. Effective responses require cooperation across institutions, across sectors, and societies. Ultimately, the resilience of our democracies depends not only on technological capabilities, but on trust. Trust in institutions, trust in reliable information, and trust in democratic processes. Protecting that trust is becoming one of the defining security challenges of our time. I would like to conclude thanking all the participants for their presence and contribution to this important dialogue. And I would like to thank in particular the president of the NATO Defense College Foundation, Ambassador Alessandro Minuto Rizzo, for his extraordinary leadership and vision. I'm confident that today's discussion will provide valuable insight and help strengthen our collective capacity to address these challenges ahead. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, Your Excellencies, distinguished guests and colleagues. I promise this is the final remark before we switch to the next discussion. In a similar fashion, let me begin with thanking the organizers, the NATO Defense College Foundation, but also others for creating a space where policymakers, practitioners, experts, and partners from across Europe can come together and discuss some of the, as we heard, most pressing challenges that our continent is facing today. We've just heard a set of insightful remarks from senior officials and representatives from public and private domain, including military. But just this morning, we had a Future Lab session with young practitioners from across Europe, where we discussed some of these challenges. And irrespectively of different perspectives around the table, we had experts and practitioners from both the Western Balkans, but also the Black Sea region. We managed to come up with some of the joint conclusions that I'm going to share with you today, hoping that these conclusions may help guide the two sessions that are ahead of us. First, one of the conclusions was that the Western Balkans and Black Sea are strategically interconnected. These regions should no longer be viewed as a separate strategic theaters, but as interconnected pieces of a wider and broader European security landscape. Both sit, as we've heard, at the crossroads of geopolitical competition and contestation. Both face several persistent challenges, such as political polarization, hybrid threats, disinformation, and both have been increasingly testing grounds for how Europe and the transatlantic community are to respond to these kinds of threats. And Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine somehow only reinforced these interconnections. Second, security is no longer only military. Across both the Western Balkans and the Black Sea region, resilience increasingly depends on strong institutions, public trust, information integrity, and societal cohesion. Foreign interference today operates through local actors and proxy actors through local vulnerabilities. And external powers exploit polarization, corruption, organized crime, distrust in public institutions, low media literacy, with two goals. One is to undermine democratic resilience, and the second one is to undermine or to prevent further Euro-Atlantic integration, at least when it comes to the Western Balkans. A third conclusion from our Future Lab sessions was that cognitive security is becoming central. It means that in many ways the battlefield today is not only military, not even digital or cyber. It is becoming increasingly cognitive, meaning targeting trust and perceptions and societal cohesion. So vulnerabilities in governance, in media ecosystems, electoral integrity and public trust are increasingly exploited through hybrid threats, but also hybrid threats that are operating below the threshold of conventional warfare that we are used to. And at the same time, AI-driven information manipulation is accelerating the scale, the speed, and sophistication of information operations. And importantly, what we have today, fact-checking alone is simply not enough. It was highlighted that the disinformation does not operate solely at the level of the facts, but it also works through ideology, through emotions, through identity, and also entertainment. And based on that, what strategic communication should be is that it must become more visual, more engaging, more human, but also more focused on storytelling that reaches broader audiences and that actually speaks to broader audiences. This is how we are going to counter the false narratives. Fourth, one of the conclusions was that media literacy and, again, public trust must become strategic priorities. This is not always the case across our national strategies and international strategies as well. One strong point raised throughout today's discussion was that media literacy and public trust cannot be treated as secondary issues. They need to be really central in our strategies. And many societies are vulnerable, as we know, to manipulation, to fake news. And this is not only the case in the Western Balkans or the Black Sea region, but also across Europe within allied partners, but also EU member states. And this is why our young practitioners think that investing in media literacy, civic education, critical thinking, and of course fundamental freedoms must become a long-term strategic priority. And finally, addressing hybrid threats requires a genuine whole-of-society approach. Although this is a buzzword, but it is a very much necessary strategy, because state institutions alone cannot address these challenges that we are facing. Building resilience requires cooperation between governments, civil society, media ecosystems, academia, private sector, including defense industries, and of course, international partners. And this is how our young practitioners see the challenges today, and they are the ones who are hopefully are to become potential leaders tomorrow. So thank you to all of the young practitioners for sharing their insights. Now briefly switching to the topic of today's first session on the Western Balkans. So you see, the Western Balkans is a peculiar region. In a grand scheme of things, one often tends to underestimate its importance or to place priorities elsewhere, for, of course, good reasons. But yet every now and then the region reminds us that it is not on the margins of European security, if it ever truly was. Today, however, the challenge in the region is a bit different. The Western Balkans have increasingly become an arena of strategic contestation, not only a strategic competition. And this is shaped by foreign interference, disinformation, energy dependency, cyber vulnerabilities, political polarization, and growing distrust, as I mentioned, in public institutions. And this is precisely why discussions on the NATO, the European Union, and the future of security in the Western Balkans cannot be disconnected from the broader discussions on democratic resilience and strategic adaptation in Europe. So perhaps the central question of our first session today is not about whether the NATO and the EU are committed enough, are present, because they clearly are. I believe that the real question is whether their strategies are evolving quickly enough to adapt to some of the most pressing challenges, such as hybrid threats, democratic erosion, and the growing complexity of European strategic and security architecture. And few voices, of course, are better placed to reflect on these questions as a distinguished panel that we have today with us. I'm very much looking forward to hearing their interventions. And with that, it is my pleasure to introduce the chair of today's panel, Madam Tatiana Georgievich, journalist and writer, former Al Jazeera Balkans. Tatiana, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Boyana. Thank you for this nice introduction. Good afternoon to everyone, and welcome to this panel of Balkans and Black Sea Perspective 2026, Democratic Resilience, AI and Cognitive Security. Today's discussion brings together distinguished experts and speakers working at the intersection of security, geopolitical, democratic governance, and emerging technologies. We are meeting today at a very special moment when the security architecture of Europe is being tested on several fronts. Traditional geopolitical tensions and conflict conflicts are increasingly interviewed with cyber threats, disinformation campaigns, artificial intelligence, and attempts to manipulate public perception and democratic process. The Balkans and the country from Western Balkans in First and Black Sea regions remains particularly important in these contexts. These regions are not only geopolitical crossroads, they are also laboratories where questions of democratic resilience, institutional trust, external influence, and societal cohesion are being tested in real time. What makes today's conversation especially important is that we will not only discuss today military or cyber dimension of security, but also cognitive security. That is some kind of new term for me, and I wanted to know what that means exactly, and the protection of democratic institutions, public trust, and citizen ability to distinguish information from disinformation or from manipulation. Our speakers will help us to explore all these topics, and in this case, thank you all for joining us, and now I would like to introduce our panelists. First of all, this is Mr. Christian Schmidt, High Representative for Bosnia and Herzegovina, Office of the High Representative Sarajevo, who will join us remotely. Then Marco Crisculo, Director Strategy and Policy for Cyber and Digital Transformation Division, NATO, Brussels. Welcome, Marco. Thank you for joining us. Seat is yours. Mr. Zoran Jelovski, former Minister of Defense and former Ambassador for North Macedonia, welcome. Good afternoon. Elen Kinsurashvili, I hope that I pronounce very well, Senior Program Coordinator, Transatlantic Security Team, German Marshall Fund, Warsaw. And then Harun Karcic, Vice Chairman, Sarajevo Security Conference from Sarajevo. Welcome. Take your seat.
Hello.
Thank you to all our panelists. Thank you for joining us. And our first speaker is Mr. Christian Schmidt, High Representative for Bosnia and Herzegovina in the Office of a High Representative in Sarajevo. Mr. Schmidt, good afternoon, and thank you for joining us. You have a long-standing career in European and international political affairs, and you're still responsible for overseeing the civilization implementation of Dayton peace agreement during this particularly sensitive period in Bosnia and Herzegovina, especially after the war in 1995, and also in the wider region. Your intervention today focuses on towards stability and inclusion, Bosnia and Herzegovina's fragilities and challenges. Mr. Schmidt, thank you for joining us, also remotely, and the floor is yours.
Okay. Do you hear me? Yeah. Thank you very much. Best regards to Rome, if I'm right. Tatiana, good to hear you. You allow me that it's good to hear Al Jazeera Balkans. I would, sorry to say this, like to have you, like other well-based and independent sources of media being present, because this leads in a short moment to one of the problems I see here in the country I am. Thank you to you all, and let me first maybe some are asking what's with him and what is he doing. You maybe have heard that the United Nations Security Council, I announced that due to the prevailing circumstances, political circumstances, it seems for me better to resign, to pave the way for new ideas, to say this in a very friendly way. I think this is, whether it's me or others, the problems will remain the same. What is this? Western Balkans, in its complexity, is indeed an area where we have and see a region, a lot of international engagement. You allow me that then somebody with quite a pretty lot of experience in this region allows himself to say that I'm not really convinced that all international activities really have been having a clear commitment focusing on what. That there is BIH is flooded with international institutions since Dayton. They have contributed a lot. If you would ask whether really had a comprehensive, integrated approach to the issues, let me add some doubts. Why? Because the complexity of the situation is comprehensive, answers comprehensively necessary, because there is not a strict distinction between military force or with any violence and developments. There are constitutional, institutional, informational, economic, and regional involving issues involving domestic actors and the interests of responsibilities of neighbors. So as it has been already founded in the Dayton General Framework for Peace, that the neighboring countries are taking a kind of a special relation. This is especially Croatia and Serbia. In a region where the answer after the Yugoslav wars was clearly to find a stable security environment, and NATO gave its role and its impact, but it is half done. And we see that after now having Northern Macedonia, Montenegro, and Albania being member of the alliance, that this is getting quite more challenging to put it in to Bosnia-Herzegovina, Kosovo, and Serbia. So I would assess that in this moment we have to look what is possible, what is necessary, and where the threats for the country and the stability of the country are coming from. So first, I would, about the issue of military developments, I would not say that I see a challenge on this level. PHS is not on the brink of war, but the absence of open conflict must not be mistaken for institutional health. Peace implementation, state functionality, and reform prospects remain under pressure. Risks must not be normalized. Anti-Dayton behavior, challenges to BIH territorial integrity, divisive rhetoric, and institutional obstruction must not be treated as a routine politics. And we see that in Bosnia-Herzegovina, especially from some political forces playing from Republika Srpska, one entity in Bosnia-Herzegovina, is obviously focused on dissolution, on the putting into question the territorial integrity of Bosnia-Herzegovina. I see that the poison of this is getting more and more consumed as normal, and this is why I think we should really reassess that the Dayton structures were not only a ceasefire in the concrete situation, but an offer for a long-standing sustainable development, peacefully oriented, and having a democratic future more than expected maybe any time before. And it is not the case that everybody is following this. Security, EU enlargement, rule of law, economic reform, election integrity, and cognitive resilience are no longer separate tracks, especially in Bosnia-Herzegovina. They are mutually reinforcing, or they are mutually taken as a tool of blockade and of dysfunctionality. OHR, this is my office, the Office of the High Representative, position which does not compete with the full understanding of full democratic self-decisive structure, but has seen what has been installed for the first years initially in Dayton to have a kind of controlling about the divergent forces which have been under a lot of pressure together after the disaster of the genocide and the war. EUFOR Althea, the military mission, which has been reduced to a mission in size and in capability, which cannot compete with the old S4 30,000, which had really to go to keep the military structure, by military means, keep the structure developing in a peaceful way. So I think what I'm now saying, this is not the position of the High Representative, but this is a position of political citizen Schmidt, that I think we will not come out without a new definition and assessment what the deterrence tool of EUFOR Althea, how it should be designed, and which position it could play. The mandates and credibility have been the overwhelming checkpoint, including the transition to, let me say, or I hear some adaptation to the Dayton system and structures in adapting the European Union accessway. The EU path is the strongest strategic stabilization tool for BIH in the region. Enlargement must remain credible, conditional, and visible to citizens, while Croatia and Serbia should be engaged as responsible stakeholders in regional stability. There are other stakeholders as well, but I have to assess that this way is not taken. The EU path is not taken. Up to now, since 2 years, Bosnia-Herzegovina has got the nomination as the EU membership candidate country, but no talks are opened. By the way, not to be compared to the special situation and challenges which are coming in Northern Macedonia or other countries. This is here because we see that the Dayton system of checks and balances, which was smartly introduced in 1995, does not give an answer if there is one group, one ethnic group, one political group not contributing to a consent or to a kind of compromise, can be overruled or can be just put into pressing for getting decisions being done. So I would not say that they should be just not respected and seen, but we have a problem. We have the problem that the system of checks and balances in a situation where some are taking this as a simple tool to demonstrate dysfunctionality of the country, that this is unfortunately leading to nowhere. So we have now the strategic priority is general elections October 26. I contributed a lot to have modern election technologies to get integrity for the elections done with the support for the independence of the Election Commission and in close cooperation with ODIHR and OSCE. But I see that this is the only step now to regain trust and confidence of citizens and voters into the election. But democratic response would need more. I think the message to EU and NATO should be speak together with one voice on BIH sovereignty, territorial integrity, and constitutional order, and understand that if we don't see a progress by using all our tools of cooperation and coordination, I see a lot of questions. Wait a moment, give me the one word and the sentence, which is very important for your discussion in all capitals of Europe. But we have to see this country is on the edge of the future development. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Schmidt. Thank you for this very important reflection of institutional stability, inclusion, and the broader democratic challenges facing Bosnia and Herzegovina, the country who is still, after 30 years after the war, in this kind of democratic transition without the end. Now, I hope that Mr. Schmidt will stay with us all the time, because later I will have some questions for you, and maybe also from audience, if we have the time. And now we now move from institutional resilience on the ground to the broader strategic and technological dimension of security within the Euro-Atlantic space. It's a pleasure to introduce Marco Crisculo, Director Strategy and Police for Cyber and Digital Transformation Division, NATO HQ Brussels. Mr. Crisculo, thank you for joining us, and you work on some of the Alliance's most pressing strategic challenges, including cyber defense, hybrid threats, artificial intelligence, resilience, and cognitive security. Your presentation today focuses on NATO's adaptation to the growing convergence between AI-led cyber defense and cognitive security. Can you please explain to us this kind of the new term, and please take it away.
Thank you very much. I would like to start from an analogy. If you look into security of information and how you fight, of course, cognitive disinformation, in the old days you would put data into a safe. And that was the way for us to preserve integrity. But today, this is much more challenging in nature. Take that safe, break it into rare arts and rare materials. And this is where really the narrative starts from. To be able to counter disinformation, you need to have access to technology, which means cloud computing, artificial intelligence, which in turn requires semiconductors, power grid, and rare materials. So the topic has been much more strategic in nature than can live on reaction of single states. When it comes to the new strategic concept, which was developed in 2022, NATO recognized, of course, the weakness of NATO openness and democratic resilience, and the fact that our adversary had tried to of course, exploit our interconnectedness on a daily basis. Hybrid threats are of all forms. Political pressure, economic coercion, sabotage, cyber attacks, and nobody is immune. Especially today that we are in a global economy where supply chains are connected to each other. What is specific about this region, the Balkan regions, vis-a-vis the Nordic countries I was talking to a week ago, or the Indo-Pacific countries I was talking 2 months ago? I think what we have in common is the threat. And the threat is transversal. What we haven't considered is how this threat can be characterized in a specific region. So there is no threat unless there is a vulnerability to be exploited. And so when it comes to the Balkans, of course, that's an area of high level development in which institutions are trying to build trust. But there are also strategic challenges in terms of foreign direct investment. If you look at Russia, Russia has a much more disruptive campaign, full of annexation, sabotage. While if you look at China as a more strategic challenge, there are foreign direct investments, or they are quite advanced in donations or influencing standards of technology, which will end up into binding what we can buy tomorrow. One thing which is absolutely important in NATO is the concept of cognitive security. Cognitive security is embedded in our NATO doctrines when it comes to the NATO warfighting concept, and it's part of what we call the warfare development imperative. It starts with understanding the level of the threat, the capability, the intent, the modus operandi of our adversaries, but it is also about understanding how we can resist to this through a resilience approach, layer resilience. 95% of the internet communications, including all NATO communications, go through undersea cables owned by the commercial sector. 70% of the SATCOM communications, including NATO communications, are hosted by industry. 70% of the host nation support during a major operation will rely entirely on commercial assets. And same applies to military mobility. 70% of the flights are provided by commercial carriers. So how can we look at this from a military perspective and not understand the complexity of the full civil military approach? When it comes to specific issues, it's also about how local impacts in the past now have expanded beyond boundaries. I mean, a few days ago, a power line cut in the north of Italy to a power line caused disruption in the crude oil delivery into south of Europe. And so looking at the Balkans as an isolated region would be a big mistake. I mean, we are all now interconnected. Or anchor dragged at the Baltic Sea in 2024 and 2025 with a major disruption of a number of services across Europe. NATO has developed a toolbox of course, which is composed of the NATO Treaty, Article 3, resilience at best through national efforts. This is pure national responsibility where, of course, the EU has a major say. But we do also have Article 4, consultation when major crises arise. But we've also developed a strategy for hybrid. What is important is to make a distinction between what is really a hybrid attack, which means that there is a campaign behind, we are trying to connect the dots, versus, okay, there have been a number of potential hybrid incidents that have caused disruption. I mean, 1,200 drones on airports in a country last year. Does it mean that all of them are hybrid? So it is absolutely important to understand things that cause disruption that requires anyway resilience at the national level versus what is part of a hybrid campaign, which requires a much more sophisticated coordinated effort. And then there is the middle ground. There is a middle ground or gray zone where you have trends and patterns. And this is also absolutely important to understand because it gives you an understanding of where things go and how you can pre-position and prepare for potential attacks. It comes with the understanding of the threat. And this is where NATO have made huge investments in the adoption of new technologies. Artificial intelligence is what you need when you collect data from thousands of sensors, being them at seas, sensors on cables, or feeds from satellite to understand, for example, how to track a cargo ship that is behaving strangely. Because the other problem that we have is also that our adversaries are mapping our vulnerabilities and are trying to position themselves. Another important element which I would like to touch is about once you have acquired technology, very often you don't have the human capital. And this is an area where investments, major investments are necessary to go into a much more integrated approach with industry. Believe it or not, but we believe that industry and outsourcing some of the core services would give us the resources and the skills and the competencies that we don't have at national level. Another important environment that we consider, of course, is the information environment. How do you understand how much your adversary can influence, of course, your audience? And this is an area where we also invested quite a lot in terms of business analytic skills to test the environment, to measure people reaction to our adversary disinformation campaigns. There is an important element which is about what do we do about hybrid campaigns in general. And we believe that so far our adversary have exploited our fragmented response. That's why NATO now is coordinating a major effort to try to improve the way we coordinate responses of all kinds, diplomatic action, political attribution, technical attribution, because we believe that by imposing higher costs to our adversaries, things will not go unnoticed. And sometimes we will also be in the position to delay them, revealing techniques, for example, or tactics that will have to get reorganized. And this works very well in the field of cybersecurity. Maybe a final touch on the Western Balkans and Black Sea regions. Acquiring technologies with the appropriate sovereignty is super expensive. So there is no way that one country on its own can build the necessary access to skills, competencies, and technology. That's why we really support heavily multinational acquisitions, defense capacity building, and coalition of the willings among various nations. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Mr. Criscuolo, thank you for this very interesting point of view. What you mentioned, that evolution of cyber and cognitive security raises broader geopolitical questions about regional stability, strategic integration, and the future direction of the Euro-Atlantic community. But our next speaker will address precisely this dimension from the perspective of the Balkans and transatlantic enlargement. It's my pleasure to welcome Mr. Zoran Jelovski, former Minister of Defense and former Ambassador for North Macedonia, Skopje. Your intervention today is titled NATO's Open Door Policy and the 3 C's Initiation and the Stabilization of the Balkans. Ambassador Jelovski, thank you for joining us, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure to be back here in Rome, and always we have an excellent discussion with the NATO Defense College Foundation, Organised, and they were very visionary when they were speaking about Western Balkans and Black Sea region. If you allow me, I will give you a bigger context in a very, very short time, and also go to the Balkans and Black Sea and importance of the corridors for the stability, security in general. We live in a period where we have a multidimensional transformation on a global level. The changes which are happening with big speed, exponentially. So we need to adapt to those new circumstances. Europe, we are living, if we look at the first 2 enlargement of European Union, they were mainly with aim to anchor the new democracy into the family, the Western world family, based on the individual freedoms, human rights, democracy, and market economy. Nowadays, we are increasingly living into multipolar world, and integration of Southeastern Europe, integration of the other parts of Europe within European community is getting more important even now, because we have more players on a scene. Therefore, recently, if you look at just last 2 weeks, we have a letter from the Chancellor Merz on how to proceed Europe and how to move forward towards integration of the Western Balkans, but also Ukraine and Moldova. That's also part of the Black Sea region. Also, I have heard that there is initiative of our friends from Italy who are very much supporting the integration of Western Balkans into the European Union, together with Austria, Slovakia, Czech Republic, and Slovenia. The letter, I don't have seen it in this time secret, but it shows the importance of integration of Southeastern Europe. we need to find a way how to integrate the region and make it more secure. The prevention is the best method. If you look now on in the Western Balkans, we'll see, as it was mentioned, Macedonia, Montenegro, and Albania, part of NATO alliance. It makes the whole region stronger and more reliable and resilient. Also, we need to find a way how to strengthen the European integration of the other parts of Europe. There are many ways. Of course, the final goal should be the full integration of the region into European Union, and the countries who would like also to join NATO too. But on the other side, the question is, could we do something to speed up that process or to make some steps towards that goal? So we speak about gradual integration of the region into European Union, and in order that to happen and to have more results, the European Commission should very quickly come with instruments and information how we can proceed. The other area is we spoke about misinformation and so on and so forth. It will be very helpful if the governments from Western Balkans and as it was stated into our positive surprise in this letter of Karsal and Merz, that we should allow the countries in Ukraine to participate to the work on some institutions of the European Commission. We should also allow the private citizens and private companies to follow, to be engaged in the preparation of new policies of the European Union. In that case, the misinformation will be less and less room for misinformation in general. That will also give a signal to the countries in the region that they are on the way to European Union, those who want to join the European Union, and that will stabilize the region in general. We need to have a I will just, if we can put the map, when you spoke about security, this is a map. There are three maps. You look Eastern Europe, Southeastern Europe. The first map is the map of European Commission. It's about high-speed rail plane, and you can see it goes around the Southeastern Europe. The second map is the map of the membership of 3Cs initiative, and you are seeing black hole over there, also white hole, the countries from Southeastern Europe not being members. And the third map is the map of 3Cs initiative, showing how the corridors, energy corridors, should be developed. And you're seeing that they are all of them somehow bypassing the region. And I will tell you, if you're a citizen living in that region, and you see what's happening, what will be your feeling? And we need the best way is to integrate them into the region. And military strategists during the NATO summit in Washington, they stated that Corridor 8 is extremely important. That Corridor 8 is the corridor which is connecting Black Sea with the Adriatic and Ionian Sea. But if you look at those maps, they're not there. So we need also to coordinate the policies of European Union, support of European Union, and NATO priorities. So it's very important for us to show to our citizens that our future is to be part of European citizens, European Union, and with that approach, we will narrow the possibility of other actors, especially now with new information technologies, with social media, with YouTube. You have a lot of channels which are giving misinformation to the citizens, and if they look maps like that, say, okay, they might be right. So we have to have all together working comprehensively to avoid that kind of situation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador Jalovsky. Thank you very much. And the issue of democratic resilience extends beyond the Western Balkans and its equally centered to development across the wider Black Sea region, where geopolitical competition and internal institutional fragilities increasingly intersect. Our next speaker will help us examine these dynamics more closely. Mrs. Elena Kinsurashvili. I hope that I pronounce well your last name. Mrs. Elena is a senior program coordinator, transatlantic security team from German Marshall Fund from Warsaw. Your work focuses on democratic resilience, geopolitical competition, transatlantic security and developments across the Black Sea regions. Thank you for joining us, and please share your thoughts with us.
Hi everyone, thank you for having me. So indeed, since Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022, the Black Sea region has really moved from the margins of European security discussions to its absolute center. The region nowadays is rightly understood as critical for global food security, energy transit, NATO's eastern flank, and the broader balance between Euro-Atlantic integration and Russia's influence across Eastern Europe as well as the South Caucasus. However, as a result, our discussions are increasingly framed through kinetic lens only. We tend to prioritize naval blockades, missile defense systems, as well as troop deployments. But I would like to make an argument that the most consequential front line in the wider Black Sea region is not exclusively military, but it is also institutional. The European Union's strategic footprint in the region is expanding rapidly. Formal accession negotiations are now underway both with Ukraine and Moldova, while Georgia formally retains EU candidate status if the regime in Tbilisi decides to return firmly to the European path. So this institutional frontline is precisely what the European Union's formal strategic approach to the Black Sea region aims to address. On paper, we see that Brussels treats democratic resilience not only as a governance issue, but as a core pillar of regional security. However, there are still some structural gaps between this high-level strategic document that we have and the complex internal reality on the ground. To understand why this strategic gap is so dangerous, we have to look at the actual democratic trajectories in the region. And this is precisely where the cases of Moldova, Georgia, as well as Romania become vital. Because taken together, they expose three completely distinct institutional realities in the same wider region. So to begin with Moldova, after a prolonged period of state capture, we're witnessing that under the leadership of President Maia Sandu, Chișinău has pursued ambitious reform agenda focused on judicial independence and anti-corruption. However, given Moldova's lengthy experience with Russian hybrid warfare, as well as oligarchic networks, it really reveals a deeper structural reality that hybrid influence does not create fragility from nothing. On the contrary, external actors, and in this case Russia, are most effective where democratic institutional trust has already been systematically eroded. Then switching gears to Georgia. For years, Georgia has been a front runner and a success story when it comes to European Union's enlargement. However, looking at the country today, we're witnessing clear and systematic signs of authoritarianism and accelerated state capture. Here, I have in mind the foreign agents law controversy, the introduction of criminal liability for independent civil society funding, and government's unilateral decision to freeze the country's EU integration process until 2028. So the case of Georgia should really stand as a stark warning for Euro-Atlantic policymakers that geopolitical orientation alone cannot be taken for granted. Because even where public support for European integration remains and has remained for the decades already overwhelmingly strong, a democratic trajectory actually can be hijacked from the top down, and therefore transforming a promising, reliable partner into a candidate in name only. And last but not least, switching gears to Romania, this is a case that fundamentally challenges the assumption that Euro-Atlantic integration automatically guarantees democratic resilience. Romania benefits from security guarantees as well as institutional anchoring that Chisinau and Tbilisi are both aspiring toward. However, the 2024/2025 parliamentary elections really exposed how easily asymmetric hybrid warfare as well as algorithmic manipulation can exploit pre-existing societal fractures, even within consolidated Euro-Atlantic structures. So taken together, I think there are three important strategic lessons for policymakers. First, institutional weakness must be understood as a hard security vulnerability and not merely a governance problem. Corruption, captured institutions, also political polarization, these are the elements that really create openings for the hostile actors, and when we talk about the wider Black Sea region, mainly we have in mind Russia, exploit with increasing sophistication. Second, democratic resilience cannot be outsourced to external integration alone. Indeed, Euro-Atlantic frameworks provide an indispensable institutional anchoring. However, they cannot substitute for domestic legitimacy as well as institutional credibility. And third, international community must really rethink deterrence more broadly, because as it has been mentioned earlier today and in the morning session as well, deterrence today is no longer military only. It is also institutional, it is societal, and it is informational. A state becomes strategically vulnerable long before military confrontation begins. A state actually becomes strategically vulnerable when citizens lose their trust in democratic institutions themselves. And once democratic legitimacy erodes internally, then external security guarantees become significantly less effective. And let us not forget that the Black Sea region, the wider Black Sea region, is indeed no longer at Europe's geopolitical periphery. It really functions nowadays as a strategic corridor connecting Europe's security as well as energy diversification, enlargement process, and the trade connectivity. So ultimately, this really means that whatever happens in the wider Black Sea region directly affects the broader credibility and resilience of the European security order itself. So to sum it up, I would say that the central challenge for international community, whether that's the European Union or NATO, is no longer simply how to defend the Black Sea region militarily, but really how to ensure that democratic institutions across the region remain resilient enough to withstand sustained geopolitical and hybrid pressure. So I'll stop here and then we can explore more during the Q&A. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. And our final speaker will examine how external actors increasingly use media, ecosystem, soft power, and cognitive influence to shape political realities in the region. It's my pleasure to introduce Mr. Harun Karcic, Vice Chairman, Sarajevo Security Conference from Sarajevo. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Karcic, and please give us your thoughts on this point.
Right. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for the invitation. You know, last year was a pretty difficult year for us journalists working in the Western Balkans. Who would have thought that the coming to power of the new administration in DC would have such huge ramifications for the entire world? And you know, I was just in Lviv last week with the Lviv Media Forum, and we were talking about how we face exactly the same, absolutely the same challenges: Central Asia, Ukraine, the Caucasus, and the Balkans. Last year, the International Republican Institute in Sarajevo in the Balkan region was shut down. USAID was shut down. NED was shut down. Radio Free Europe was shut down. Internews was shut down. And of course, unrelated to that, Al Jazeera, where I worked for 15 years and you as well, was also one of the channels where, so we had hundreds of people who lost their jobs. Now, bear in mind that the Balkan region, you know, we've been going through a very difficult transition. You know, we still call it the post-war region. I mean, it's been 30 years, but you know, it's been a very tough transition from war to peace and from communism to democracy, with a lot of external actors and foreign malign influences. And what worries me most now as a media worker is that the region has still not developed its full resilience, and even so, it's being attacked from different angles by different warring parties. We have seen we have in Belgrade and in Banja Luka, and the part of the Republika Srpska, we have Russian media outlets, Kremlin and Sputnik and Russia Beyond the Headlines, which churn out propaganda pieces on a daily basis and disseminate this information for free throughout the Balkan region. And Balkan media outlets, being impoverished as they are, they will very, very readily copy-paste these news pieces, copy-paste them, inadvertently helping disseminate Kremlin propaganda. They get translated texts, they get video footage, they get photographs for free. And what does that result? That results in the fact that you have a completely parallel narrative being created in the Balkan region. When Russia attacked Ukraine in 2022, reading tabloids like Informer in Belgrade, the headline ran, "Ukraine attacks Russia. NATO places nuclear missiles in Ukraine." I mean, completely parallel reality, devoid of any truth whatsoever. When you speak to folks from the Republika Srpska and Serbia proper, anti-NATO sentiment is very high, anti-EU sentiment is very high. Their media outlets and their government officials and their political analysts and think tankers, they will lionize Russia's military. They will lionize links between President Vučić and President Putin. They will remind their fellow citizens that NATO bombed Serbia back in 1999. They will not tell them why that happened because of Slobodan Milosevic. And they also try and push this narrative of how there's a third path, a third option. They have this Eurasian narrative where Russia and China, even Turkey, are okay countries to be allied with. And this is having a ripple effect on Bosnia as well. And you speak to people from if you look at the International Republican Institute and their statistics and opinion polls, in the Bosniak Muslims and Bosnian Croats are very pro-EU, pro-NATO, more than 70%. That's higher than in many NATO member states. It's a very high pro-NATO stance. This is being challenged now by all this propaganda coming from abroad, and that is what worries me, because the country is nowhere close to joining either the alliance or the EU, and is being attacked, is being torpedoed from different angles. And to the younger generation, this new narrative is being disseminated that NATO has internal divisions. It's letting Ukraine go by itself. There is no future in the alliance, and so on and so forth. And this is going to have a serious effect on the younger population very, very soon. Now, after you talked about how the U.S. pulled out its funding. The European Union has significant funds, but it's not able to speak with one voice. NATO HQ in Sarajevo by itself. They have different experts who are supposed to work on cognitive resilience. I don't see really much effect on that. Just to give you an example, the United Kingdom sponsors one person every 6 months to act as a strategic advisor at the NATO HQ in Sarajevo. So one person gets a UK person with a military background gets parachuted to Sarajevo every 6 months with no local language skills, no knowledge of history, nothing whatsoever, and he's supposed to advise local MOD officials on how to counter the Russian narrative. This is not a very serious approach. And what we need at the moment is what many countries in the Western Balkans lack. We need institutional centers for fighting for cognitive resilience, for fighting disinformation, and for working with government officials and young leaders and so on and so forth. What we have now is in the level of the NGO sector. Various Western organizations or states or embassies sponsoring 1 or 2 or 3 odd projects on countering disinformation and building cognitive resilience. This is not we need a holistic approach which will cover the entire Western Balkans as a whole. We don't have that at the moment, and we are we are in a very serious war. This is a war of the minds. What worries me is that if Russia has its upper hand in Ukraine, it's not going to stop there. It's going to try and poke NATO's soft underbelly. And I'm glad now that we're talking about how the Balkans is no longer the periphery. That is exactly the argument we are making. 30 years ago, you could dismiss Bosnia or the Western Balkans as the periphery of Europe, something not important, far away. You know, local tribes killing each other, fine. But today, Bosnia neighbors two NATO member states, Croatia and Montenegro. If something gets out of hand, it will have a spillover effect on two NATO member states, and NATO will have to be involved sooner or later. So the argument that we are making as a bunch of young Bosnian guys who gather around the Sarajevo Security Conference is, let's try and invest now and build resilience instead of waiting for something to happen. We tried to raise the red flags in 2014 after the little green men in Crimea. I reported from Ukraine myself. Nobody took us seriously. People are taking the Balkans much more seriously now after the 2022 invasion. Fine, but it was going to take a lot more work. And now I'm happy that I was at SHAPE a couple of months ago, and the map that the gentleman, the foreign minister showed just now. Now there's a lot more talk at SHAPE about military mobility across the Western Balkans, because people realize now that if you want to move tanks or artillery pieces from Slovenia or Croatia towards Greece, for example, to beef up your southern flank, it has to pass through the Western Balkans. What is the state of railways and roads in the Western Balkans? It's catastrophic. If you want to beef up the NATO southern flank, and southeastern flank, you need to work on building on enhancing military mobility in the Western Balkans. I believe EUISS and my friend Bojana, they did a paper, a pretty serious paper on military mobility in the Western Balkans. This is what we need to talk about. So a number of factors, just to sum up. So we need to talk about building resilience in the Western Balkans, investing much more seriously in cognitive resilience, and of course we haven't even mentioned our critical infrastructure, which is completely unprotected. Nothing is protected whatsoever. Dams, electric grids, nothing whatsoever, And I'm surprised that we have not had any major cyber attacks so far. I'm really surprised. And I hope nobody from Moscow takes this as an idea. And of course, military mobility. That's all for me. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Mr. Haron. Thank you for this very interesting intervention regarding different narratives and polarization of society and media polarization as well. I wanted also to notice that I did the documentary about the different history textbooks that students use in Bosnia and Herzegovina 30 years after the war, and we still now have in Bosnia and Herzegovina, for example, some project, two schools after the same roof, where students from different entities follow the different lessons and use completely different history textbook. And if we start from the school, we can understand, this kind of narrative that we have in not only in Bosnia but also in Serbia and other countries. Now, okay, I will come back later with some questions for you. Now I want to start with the first round of the questions. I don't know if Mr. Schmidt is still with us. If yes, I kindly invite him to join us, or maybe not. Okay, Mr. Schmidt, welcome back. Okay, Mr. Karčić, I don't know if you heard all his intervention, spoke about polarization and different narrative that we still have in Bosnia, not only in Bosnia, but in other countries in the region of the Western Balkans. And I want to ask you, I have one particular question. In your view, what, after 30 years, let's say, what represents the greatest long-term risk to democratic stability in the country? And if you see, where do you still see the strongest ground for optimism?
Thank you very much. First, I'm a notoric optimist. And you need to do this in Bosnia-Herzegovina. Without an optimism, you are lost. First, may I allow you to thank you, Tatiana, for you refer to your research about history books, the different history books and curricula. I think this is very important, as well about all Harun Kacic's description about where the indoctrination, to say, is coming from. I see that who's we? Those who feel obliged to promote democratic society, democratic structures, and security involvement, that sometimes we're a little bit too remote, too reserved, to go full speed on counter activities as to stop what we're hearing, this fake news issue. I'm happy that I have the impression that the European Union does understand that you need a massive campaign information on the social media about what is on stake. I do not want to take Valentina Superti's position forward, but I thank her already now that I see that the EU Commission has taken not only note but seen what is necessary to do. I share as well a view about NATO and the necessity to get more information about. We will not be able, and we do not want to just to merge all different opinions. But what is on stake in this moment is that we have not developed our tools in keeping the free decision and the free information available for a lot of people. We see on the same side that there are several tools. First, I would talk about energy, but there are others as well, where you can influence very directly the situation in the country. And the situation, if I'm allowed, I wouldn't compare, but just to refer to Serbia and the Bosnia-Herzegovina, I see that in Serbia there is a remarkable civic society move on. I do not want to comment on how it came and what should be done or what the directions are, but just to state this. I do not this in a broader way in Bosnia-Herzegovina. I would encourage to look on encouraging the civic society to going in and not only to outsource its opinion only in the groups of the ethnic homogeneous political position. It needs a preparedness to merge and to see that the challenge of development in terms of security is all the same. Harun Kacik, you referred to the situation and the polls about European Union integration in the Croat community, Bosnian Croat community, and Bosnia community. I would say if we would see in Republika Srpska a more real open information and not these sometimes closely referring to churches' ideas of having everything under control in media way, I would as well expect that we would have in Republika Srpska the similar figures, because it is not about avoiding, let me say, a move of one against the other. It's avoiding about instrumentalizing differences politically, and this is what we see and what we feel. I would not say there is actual danger of a conflict, as I said, but in the long term, I have to see that we cannot continue as we are doing now. We have to be more active and to realize that there can develop a real security problem. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Schmidt. Thank you for your answer. And now I want to switch to ask Mr. Chris Kulo that NATO increasingly speak about resilience not only in military terms but also in cognitive and social terms. And Mr. Haron also mentioned this kind of propaganda, polarization of the media, disinformation and manipulation of the population society. And my question is for you, how can democratic societies defend themselves against disinformation and this kind of manipulation while at the same time preserving democratic openness and freedom of expression?
Yeah, it is an absolutely important element. Of course, it is not NATO core business, but we work, of course, in cooperation with allies. Where that's is really Article 3 is about being resilient, and this is where national responsibility is. I think, at the end, it's about really understanding the risk that we take. Risk that we take by not addressing, for example, the root cause of the problem. This comes with education. You can try to counter information on a regular basis, but you will always be behind the curve. Because our adversaries, they have no rules of engagements. Why? We believe in the freedom of expression, we believe in democratic society, and therefore we will always rules of engagement, even in the use of tools. So we have rules of engagement, we use AI, principle of responsible use. We want to make sure that when we use artificial intelligence, that we can explain it, that we can have reassurance mechanisms, that we can be transparent to the public. Our adversaries, they don't play with these rules. So it comes really with preparing population at school, with basic education, to understand the risk that they take. The second element is about providing them the tools. I mean, that's also a very important thing. Providing them the digital tools to be able also to discern what is a disinformation piece of information versus what is truth. And it's really not about going down and influencing what is not really in our space. There is an element of awareness also for society, and I think it links back to what our colleague said, critical infrastructures. I mean, we need to understand the risk that we take from a civil side perspective and what consequences this risk have in case of a war. I mean, it's really about even raising alert on what happens if you're going to do anything about it. What happens if our power grid has not been secure as it should. So it's really about raising the level of awareness, not only about the basic population, but also about our politicians and providing the tools. Access to the tools is very complex, as I said. We have to make sure that these tools are provided in a way which are transparent, open, and explainable.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And now I want to switch to ex-Ambassador Yolowski. You often described this kind of simultaneity as a geopolitical vulnerability and a strategic opportunity for our Atlantic integration. In your view, we saw also the different maps that you show us. Can initiatives such as 3C initiative and greater participation of Western Balkan states in a UA institutional process compensate for the slow pace of enlargement, or does the region still risk drifting into deeper geopolitical uncertainty?
First of all, can you hear me? Yeah. First of all, I would like to mention that power vacuum is not healthy. It's not good neither for Western Balkans, neither for European Union, neither for NATO. So the more quick integration of the region into Euro-Atlantic structures is better for all of us, for the region, for NATO, and the European Union. My country is more than 20 years candidate country. We received probably more than 20 times recommendation to start negotiations. We speak about front runners, we are not even runner, we cannot run. So people from the region are looking what's going on. And therefore we need to show some progress, some positive signals from our partners in European Union let us feel that we are engaged, that our voice is heard in Brussels. That will at the same time prepare our society for full membership. You know, if you have a Minister of Economy or Minister of Energy sitting on a table in Brussels without the right to vote, but listening what's going on, presenting his or her views, it also at the same time prepares the society to move forwards. As I mentioned, European Union is preparing a number of legislations. If we, in that process of preparation, we consult the stakeholders in the region, they will feel, of course, as I mentioned, we don't have right to vote, but they will feel engaged, and they will feel that they are part of the process. It will be very important strategic signal from our allies. You know, I believe that we as a region are also contributing quite a lot to the stability and security on the continent. Number of our countries have their soldiers serving in Bosnia. My country has in Bosnia, Kosovo, some other places where we are needed. So also Europe should look at also what we can contribute. As I mentioned, those corridors, they're not just corridors for us. They're corridors for NATO, they're corridors for European Union. And therefore, I believe by integrating us, it will be beneficial for both sides. And we need to find a way how to move forward. I would be most happy that if the whole region very quickly is integrated into European Union. And I know that some countries would like to achieve member states of European Union. As I mentioned, there's initiative, some countries from, as I mentioned, Italy, Slovenia, Czech Republic, Slovakia, Austria, to see how that could proceed. The Chancellor Merz wrote a letter about Ukraine, but also he mentioned the Western Balkans. So we need to see some tangible results. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Jolovsky. We are late, and my next question is for Ms. Kinsurshvili. You highlighted that countries inside the European Union and NATO are vulnerable to polarization, international distrust, and informational pressure, not just because of external forces, of course. And do you believe that democratic resilience depends less on formal integration frameworks and more on construction of the legitimacy and credibility of political institutions themselves?
Thank you for that question. I think it kind of goes hand by hand. I think the two factors are really affecting each other in the ways that they develop. I mean, it is true that I do think that before talking about integration into various Euro-Atlantic frameworks, it is important to make sure that on the domestic level, the institutions that we're dealing with are democratic. But as it has already been mentioned throughout the conference today, there are some of the tools and toolkits that are accessible to the country states, whether to the country member states of NATO and the EU. So I do think that essentially when there is a will, there is a way. So the two of them, the two elements should go hand by hand together.
Okay, thank you. You were very quickly. We have some noises there, and sorry for that. And my final question will be for Mr. Karčić. You described this kind of external influences. I kindly ask you for peace. Okay. You describe Russia as operating through different but complementary models of influence in the Balkans and this kind of region. One focus more on this corruption and the other of structural dependency. Which of these approaches do you see as posing the more difficult long-term challenge for democratic societies in the region?
Right. So let's, when we talk about foreign malign influences, we talk primarily about Russia and China, but there are also increasing other influences. You know, you have, certain Gulf countries, the United Arab Emirates, are present in the region. Israel is now becoming quite present in the region, but let's focus on these two, Russia and China. Many people have asked me, do Russia and China coordinate their activities in the Western Balkans? I do not think so. China's approach has been primarily through the Belt and Road Initiative. As you know, they have been building railways and bridges and tunnels through numerous European countries, but in the Balkans per se, in Greece, the famous, the Pelješac Bridge in Croatia, the various highways in Montenegro, the Budapest-Belgrade railways, so on and so forth. China, unlike us Europeans who think from one election cycle to another, the Chinese think 200 years from now. So what they're doing now is laying the frameworks which will be used 100, 200 years from now. Their approach has been to provide very low interest credits to various Balkan countries, not to lecture Balkan countries on human rights abuses and whatnot, and slowly, once these countries fall into the debt trap, to slowly have this economic influence merge into political influence. We see that in the case of Bosnia, where China entered about 10 years ago, where only now do we see this economic influence merging, morphing into political influence. In what way? In the sense that Chinese military officials and ambassadors are now increasingly present in the Republic of Srpska at the January 9th celebrations, and so on and so forth. In the case of Russia, Russia has numerous channels of how it operates. It has the Night Wolves have their chapters in Banja Luka, the Putin's famous bikers, Night Wolves. They have their chapters in Banja Luka and in Serbia. You have the Serbian Orthodox Church, which enjoys some sort of semi-autonomous status. You have Russian political proxies in the region, not only in Bosnia, in numerous countries, ethnic Serbs who gravitate towards Belgrade and eventually Moscow. So political proxies. You have officials in the MODs and intelligence agencies who leak information towards Moscow. When you speak to folks in Montenegro or in Bosnia per se, people are quite worried that there are individuals in these countries that are leaking information, especially Montenegro, which is a NATO member state, leaking info towards Belgrade and Moscow. And of course, you have the non-governmental sector, and in addition to the media sector, the non-governmental sector, you have various associations, like war veterans associations in the Western Balkans, which cooperate closely with Russians. In what sense? You had numerous Bosnian Serbs and Serbs from Serbia proper who took part in the annexation of Crimea in Sevastopol. This was we from Al Jazeera recorded them in 2014, and the US media outlet Vice News had a documentary about Russian volunteers in Sevastopol in 2014 who on camera said that they were regulating traffic in Sevastopol and not really taking part in any military activities. Vice versa, you have Russian, former volunteers, former fighters from Crimea and Donbas region who have been coming to the Republic of Srpska, Serbia, and who have been training folks in Moldova. We have been covering that story the last 2 years about Russian former fighters, war veterans that have been training certain thugs in Moldova to sow chaos. So there are at least 4 or 5 different channels of cooperation. But I would look at both of them quite seriously. China has its own ambitions, Russia has its own, but both are maligned for the region. And of course, now you have the Israelis. We know recently how an Israeli private intelligence company, Black Cube, was heavily involved in helping Yanis Yansha come back to power. This is also another factor that we should be looking at. So that's pretty much in a nutshell.
Thank you very much, Mr. Karancic. And unfortunately, we don't have the time for the questions from audience. As we conclude today's discussion, several important themes stand out. First, that democratic resilience can no longer be understood exclusively through traditional military or institutional frameworks. Second, today's discussion highlights that resilience ultimately depends not only on external alliances or security guarantees, but also on credibility of institution, public trust, media literacy, and the ability of democratic society to maintain cohesion under pressure. And finally, one of the clearest messages emerging, I think, from this panel is that the geopolitical competition increasingly unfolds in the cognitive domain through narratives, perception, information ecosystem, and the manipulation of public trust. I would like in this way to sincerely thank all our speakers for sharing their expertise and thoughts with us today, and thank you for all of you to participating in this important conversation. Enjoy the next panel and the rest of the day. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. Harane, drago mi je. Pa dobro sam.
Please take your seats. We have now immediately a video connection with Mrs. Valentina Superti from the General Director for Enlargement and Eastern Neighborhood in the Western Balkans. Thank you very much. Stay tuned.
Good afternoon. Should I start? Hello, good afternoon. Do you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. Good afternoon to all of you, and sorry for not being with you in person, but still nice to be with you virtually. First of all, I would like to thank very much all the organizers and the sponsors, the NATO Defense College Foundation, Italy's Ministry of Foreign Affairs, International Council on Environmental Economics and Development, Fondazione Compagnia di San Paolo, Fondazione CSF, and the NATO Defense College. This is a very important topic, and it's a very timely discussion, being it about security challenges and democratic resilience from a Western Balkans and the Black Sea perspective, but also relative to the European Union. I am particularly responsible in the European Commission for the Western Balkans, so I will rather focus on this geographical area. And I always say it's sufficient to have a look at the geographical map to understand why the Western Balkans are of strategic relevance and importance for the European Union. And as you know, we are working closely with the Western Balkans on a number of strands. The first key important strand is enlargement. As you know, actually 5 of the Western Balkans countries are actually candidates for membership to the European Union, and this is since a number of years. And from the European Union perspective, we do consider that enlarging the EU to the Western Balkans is and beyond is a key investment in our peace, security, stability, and prosperity. And actually, in the last years, in particular, since the Russian invasion in Ukraine, but also very much with the further geopolitical developments in mind, actually the enlargement policy has gained what we call a new momentum. And indeed, if we have a look at the facts, it's just facts that in particular Montenegro and Albania are making what I like to define as stunning progress in the accession negotiations. So in the negotiations that should lead these 2 countries joining the European Union. With Montenegro, the objective is to close accession negotiations by the end of this year, and with Albania in the course of 27. And actually it's today, 26th of May 26, that we are having an intergovernmental conference with Albania on the country meeting the so-called rule of law benchmarks, which are an essential part of the accession process. Why? Because on the one hand, for enlargement and for accession, indeed, the political and geopolitical consideration, the security-related considerations are very important. At the same time, the enlargement process is a merit-based process where progress in the accession negotiations is dependent on the accomplishment of reforms, in particular in the rule of law area. What is rule of law? You all know we are talking about equality of justice, of the democratic institutions, but also anti-corruption, and so forth. But coming also to the topic that you are discussing today, especially in the current geopolitical context, there is one criteria that has gained importance in our negotiations with the Western Balkans, which is their alignment with the so-called CFSP, apology for the acronym. You all know this is about the common foreign and security policy of the EU. And actually, the Western Balkans, 5 of these countries are fully aligned, 100% aligned with the EU CFSP, which means also that they are reliable partners from the security point of view. Some of them are also NATO members, as you know. That being said, it may be counterintuitive to an extent, but the more we are progressing with the accession negotiations with the Western Balkans, the more we think and we assess that there are risks. One of these risks is about hybrid threats, which clearly pose an essential risk to democratic resilience. Hybrid threats is one important topic for consideration. The second one is about the so-called foreign information manipulation and interference, which poses a risk for the Western Balkans. Why? Because this manipulation and interference builds on what are, to an extent, structural vulnerabilities, sometimes fragile media markets, polarization in society, and sometimes a limited trust in institutions, which all these things all put together create an environment in which foreign interference and disinformation can operate. So with all this in mind, it's important for us to integrate our Western Balkan partners in the precisely common foreign and security policy, but also in the common security and defense policy to strengthen their resilience against foreign manipulation and hybrid threats. Also, we are, as you know, together with the External Action Service and the European Commission, we are working on security and defense partnerships, in particular with Albania and North Macedonia. Another important topic that we are working on to improve resilience in the Western Balkans is cybersecurity. So we are now cooperating since a couple of months with the EU agency, ENISA, in order to enhance the cyber resilience capacities of the Western Balkans. And progressively, we are integrating the Western Balkans into the European Union cybersecurity framework. Also, for some of these partners, we are granting access to the so-called EU Cybersecurity Reserve, which is an instrument, it's a short-term instrument meant to support institutions when there is a cyber attack. And we know that there are cyber attacks. I could mention, for example, the case of Montenegro. Perhaps unfortunately, no surprise recently, but also Albania with Iran. And we are also working closely with the Western Balkans to align their cybersecurity legislation with that applicable in the European Union. In addition to all of this, we are also working with the Western Balkans for enhancing their regional cooperation, information sharing, and developing also their cybersecurity workforce, because it's also a matter of having the skills which are not always available in these countries. So all of this to say that on the one hand, we are mindful and keen to continue accession negotiations with all these countries. Doing accession negotiations also means aligning with all the EU acquis and having a track record in the EU acquis. But at the same time, we are working more closely with them on a number of topics. The tool is called the gradual integration. So on certain topics that we consider particularly important, and certainly democratic resilience, media freedom, and maturity, let's say, of society are key in this respect. But also on other topics, we are integrating progressively the Western Balkans into the EU, and our policy tool to do so, you may have heard about it, it's the growth plan for the Western Balkans, which foresees a progressive integration in some selected area of the EU single market, but also foresees incentivizing reforms with the so-called growth facility. So with this, I hope I gave you a broad, inevitably broad overview on what we are doing from the EU side in order to bring the Western Balkans closer. As you know, the governance is such that European Commission proposes, EU member states, so the 27 member states decide. In enlargement, it's unanimity, so it's not always easy, but I can certainly testify that in the last 2 years, there has been an increase in the commitment to enlargement at large, and to have the Western Balkans closer to us, very much so. Thank you so much.
Is there
okay,
order?
I think you're seated third, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes,
third. Here.
There? Okay.
Yes. Dr. Solom.
Which one?
And you are here.
On this one here.
I'm the fourth.
Yes.
It's really strong.
Pardon?
The lights.
Okay.
Good afternoon, and welcome to the last but very interesting session of this event, in which we will focus on artificial intelligence and cognitive security, emerging risks and implications. I'm Dardan Koçani, I'm from Kosovo, and I work at the Global Initiative Against Transnational Organized Crime, a civil society organization based in Geneva, which we do research on organized crime, and we support building resilience. It is a great honor for me to be the chair or the moderator of this panel, in which we have 5 distinguished experts who have a very diverse experience but also perspective on this topic. with expertise covering not only their respective countries and the region, but also beyond. We would like to be this session as interactive as possible, thus we have allocated a dedicated time for question and answers from the audience, and in this regard I would kindly ask the panelists to be cautious of the time that we have agreed, so we give the floor to the audience for questions. Without further ado, I would like now to give the floor to the first panelist, Mr. Edoardo Giglio, who is a partner in risk advisory and the defense, security and justice industry leader for Deloitte in Italy. His background includes a career at New Scotland Yard, in which he collaborated with several EU agencies, and 13 years of senior advisory positions working with global organizations including Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the UN, WHO, and multinationals within the energy and defense sector. Mr. Edoardo will speak today about strong and weak points in the EU's approach to cognitive security, particularly in the decision-making and technological domains. Edoardo?
All right. Well, thank you very much for having me. I see I've got the timer there, so I'll keep it nice and snappy. So I just wanted to start by looking at the looking glass the opposite way around. So essentially starting off with Admiral Van Dier's comment 6 days ago on Palantir, and stating that the reason why NATO's using Palantir is because there isn't a worthwhile European alternative. And if we couple that with Mario Draghi's now famous report on the lack of EU innovation, and you keep those in mind, those are the two initial points which I will weave my short speech on. And why is this important? Because everything that we do today is interconnected, like we heard from our previous panelists, but more so, we use the same tools, we use the same AI algorithms. And why is this important for the cognitive security, not just of Europe, but the West and the rest of the world? Because they all rely on a same architecture, and we largely ignore what that is. So AI, by definition, reverses to the mean, which means that we all rely to the majority. It goes back to the majority version of a particular topic. So if you look at like a bell curve, it will take the center points and then they'll leave outside the outliers. And from a strategic perspective, the outliers is where the gold is. There is also a lot of noise. There is also a lot of threats in the outliers, and standard deviation 3 for the engineers or STEM practitioners amongst us. But that's where the true strategic lesson lies. But more than that, it has implications on a defensive posture. We keep talking about AI being used quite rightly by aggressors, by threat actors, because it democratizes the technical capability and the ease with which to undertake attacks, but we seem sometimes to avoid the defensive aspect for it. And on that, perhaps, as we're talking about the Balkans, there are two specific incidents which are worth mentioning, which I think validate the point. The first was in Romania, and I'm just using my notes just to get the numbers accurate, but Romania between November and December 2024, if you remember, Georgescu went from a 1% polling to 23% polling in the presidential election in just 3 weeks. And the TikTok accounts, to 25,000 linked TikTok accounts, of which 800 had been created in 2016 and lay dormant, the AI did not track it. It didn't flag it. The TikTok AI moderation platform did not itemize it as a potential risk. And the reason for that is because it was so far on the outlier scale, it was so small and it deviated so much from the mean that it didn't pick it up. Likewise in Moldova, October 2024, so it's quite interesting because it's on the same period. During the referendum and the presidential election, 39 million were transferred from a Russian bank to 130,000 voters. And this was hyper-localized via local Telegram and Facebook activity. And the interesting part here, which I think absolutely centers the point, is then it was undertaken targeted specifically to the Gaugads region, utilizing the Gaugads Turkish language, which is spoken only by 150,000 people approximately. So the LLM models on which the AI moderation was built upon was never trained for that. And because it was never trained for that, it was so far on the bell curve, or so far as an outlier scale, that it never picked it up as a threat. So that really underscores the fact that we're using tools that are mean seekers, so they revert to the mean, what sometimes is called as inverse intelligence. And you know, this is nothing new. This is just the same as the problem of being hosed by too much information. There are a number of well-known books that talk about it. The NATO review actually for 2024 actually spoke to this specific point on a paper which I can't see now, but here it is: the algorithmic invasion, how information warfare threatens NATO's eastern flank, and it actually highlighted it as an issue. Why is this important? Why did I mention the innovation aspect? You wonder, because we're using this tool automatically without looking at it strategically. That word coming from a consultant, we tend to overuse it, but it is strategic because we're not thinking ahead. We don't have a foresight. One of the reasons for it, which Draghi highlighted, is because in Europe we do not have an innovation strategy. We talk about strategy, we talk about research and development as if it were synonymous with innovation, but it's not. R&D is a tool, and it requires a strategy. There are a number of strategies we can pursue: moonshot innovation, disruptive innovation, sustainable innovation, basic research. These are all innovation strategies. We don't have a taxonomy at the moment which we're utilizing, and we're not at the moment prioritizing it as a must. And why is this important? Because how the next AI tools are going to be developed require an innovation strategy to do so. And it's interesting that out of the whole 400-page Draghi report, the creation of DARPA, which he mentioned, was one of the very few prescriptive elements on it, and that's quite telling as to the importance of it. I'll leave you just with one thought. We're talking about cognitive warfare, we're talking about education, all vitally important, but we all have in our pockets one, if not two, some of us three phones. And each phone has an average of 80 apps, which we utilize about 96 times a day. The average human being lies 100 times a day, so it's equal to our lying amount. That picks up your usage, when you use it, when you're most prone to be active during your cognitive process, when you become cognitively degraded, what type of apps you use, etc., etc., etc. So I put it to you then. In an era of where we're coming up to quantum or post-quantum encryption, where we have countries where they are gathering data now to then decrypt later. We have no idea what the level of encryption is on all these apps that we're using. It's probably one of the lowest hanging fruits that we could do to tackle it. So vital to look at strategy, vital to collaborate, but vital also to look at operational tactics and the actual tools that we can use to change and do something today to the roadmap for tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you, Eduardo. I must say that before coming to this event, I was not familiar with the word of cognitive security, and I believe that also in our region, even institutions, public sector in general, have very little understanding. But this event today in the morning session, but also your presentation, was very informative, and I think that we need to do more to increase awareness about cognitive security, but also the vulnerabilities that you mentioned. We are very honored today that we have with us Dr. Solomon Pasi, who is the founding president of the Athletic Club of Bulgaria and co-chairman of Hello Space. He has an extensive and highly diverse career with achievements, I would say, difficult to summarize in few sentences. He founded the Athletic Club of Bulgaria and helped shape the country's path toward the NATO and the EU membership. As foreign minister, he oversaw Bulgaria's NATO accession and contributed to its EU integration. He also served on the UN Security Council and as OSCE chairman in office, supporting democratic reform, conflict resolution, and international security. Today, Dr. Solomon will present to us about Russian influence and strategic vulnerabilities in the Balkans, specifically the Bulgarian case.
Well, thank you very much, Dardan, for this generous introduction. My wife is here, she will not believe you. Thank you, Ambassador Minuto Rizzo, and thank you, NATO Defense College Foundation, for this great and timely event. And thank you for your great team, your colleagues, Lorenza and her colleagues are responding to every email after 5 seconds, so this is fantastic. Thank you. Well, today, being in Rome, talking about cognitive security, I cannot help but mentioning Pope Leo, who just spoke about AI, and he said today that AI should be disarmed. He not only said this, but he signed an encyclic about this in this respect. This encyclic was signed a few days before. Which brings me back to my original profession, which is AI and Turing machines and computer sciences. And I would permit to interpret what the Pope said today. This is that we need regulations of AI. We cannot stop the AI, but we need regulations. And I'm ready to talk long hours about regulations, because the regulations are those who made Homo sapiens the most widespread mammal in the world. Today, however, I would like to stress on one big territory and one big policy which is related to AI. But let me start with the title of the conference, Balkans. The Balkans are small holes in a big ship. The ship will not sink if we don't fix the holes. Moreover, even if we fix the holes, we do not guarantee that the ship will not sink. But we must do our homework, because the small holes are a whole universe for those who live within them. I'm coming from a country of this nature. Black Sea. The Black Sea is much a bigger hole. This is such a big hole that the ship can sink because of this hole. But even if we succeed to fix this hole, this is not a guarantee that the ship will not sink again. But we must do this homework as well. Western Balkans. Western Balkans is a neologism which was invented in 1998 by the Austrian presidency of the European Union, because, excuse my French, Bulgaria and Romania. It was invented because we started the negotiations to join the European Union, and the rest of the Balkans did not. So they say, okay, Bulgaria and Romania, go ahead. The Western Balkans, we shall think about it later. Western Balkans, we can launch relatively simple solutions. About Kosovo. Why we as NATO do not say we spread Article 5 over Kosovo? Kosovo, we have 4 countries who do not recognize the government, do not recognize the state, but nevertheless, we don't recognize the space as a country, or Antarctica as a country, or the cognitive space as a country, but we defend them. We can say we defend the people and we defend the territory without recognition of the government. Bosnia and Herzegovina. We have excellent examples, precedents made by Cyprus, by Korea, by Germany. Why not inviting Bosnia and Herzegovina minus Republika Srpska to join as soon as possible NATO and the European Union, and the rest of the country will join when ready? Serbia. Why we do not say, we as NATO, as European Union, why we do not say we do not admit to the European Union anyone who is not member of NATO? Membership in NATO is a clearing room for everybody. And now the big hole. The big hole is the policy about propaganda. Propaganda is the big hole that we have to fix. Because of propaganda, the ship will sink. Because propaganda is winning the hearts and the minds of people. In my country, in Bulgaria, until very recently, we had 50 members of parliament out of 240 which were loyal to the Kremlin. Not after these elections anymore. They shrink to 10. But the threat is always there. If they succeed to win the seats in my parliament, why do they need nuclear weapons? They don't need weapons at all. They will have the country from inside. I made the statistics. What is the money that Russia is investing for propaganda? It is about $2 billion. The West is investing for counter-propaganda about $1 billion. And China is investing for propaganda about $12 billion. $12 billion. The propaganda is the cheapest weapon with the widest possible effect and the longest lasting one. We say we need 5% from the GDP for security within NATO. Well, but how many of these 5% we invest in anti-propaganda? We need to invest 90% of them in anti-propaganda. A suggestion which my organization, the Atlantic Club, made 2 years ago for the Washington Summit of NATO, we need to invoke Article 5 of NATO on a daily basis, 24/7, to fight with propaganda. Article 5 says that attack against one is attack against all. It doesn't say attack with what weapon. And the words are much more dangerous weapon than the nuclear weapons. Much more dangerous, because we know many people who were killed by words, and we were lucky not to have use of nuclear weapons after the Second World War. Hitler stayed in power because of propaganda, and Putin, as his best student, is doing the same. And the huge hole that I would like to draw your attention that has to be fixed. I'm very happy that Marco Criscuolo said that China is strategic. Yes, China is strategic, and the biggest territory, the strategic territory that we need to defend is Taiwan. Normally the Chinese diplomat said, well, we have one China policy. Well, you have one China policy, but what we have to have against it? We need one democracy policy. One democracy policy means that each democracy is responsible for all democracies and vice versa. This is something that we have to sell to the rest of the world. One democracy policy, because China has global ambitions. China wants and has the ability in foreseeable future to conquer the world. The Chinese people are the only people in the world which are capable to build a road today, which road will be used for the first time after 100 years. They have strategic thinking which is not typical for democratic countries, but we have to take this into account. That's why, based on one democracy principle, I personally do not have big hesitations when there is a conflict or dispute between Taiwan and China, Korea and North Korea, Israel and Iran, United States and Venezuela and Cuba, or Ukraine and Russia. The one democracy principle will be helping us to go ahead and to help the ship not sinking. And finally, my last sentence, because talking of propaganda, we can go back to the origins of democracy, back to Socrates. Socrates was killed, was sentenced to death, because he was pointing out the deficiencies of democracy. And unfortunately, it is the case that people who are trying to repair democracy are frequently killed by democracy.
Thank you, Dr. Solomon, for this very enlightening presentation and speech. I also share with you that some of the issues, in fact, have simple solutions, but yet we seem to not have the ability, or the international community has no the ability to resolve them, and they have been outstanding issues for more than 20 years in the region. Now, I would like to invite the third panelist, my neighbor from North Macedonia, Miroslav Savdovski. He's a senior analyst at the European Center of Excellence for Countering Hybrid Threats in Helsinki. In his capacity, he contributes to the work of the Community of Interest on Hybrid Influence and leads the center's analytical focus on the Western Balkans region. Previously, he has served in the cabinet of the Minister of Foreign Affairs and the cabinet of the Deputy Prime Minister of North Macedonia, and worked also as a media consultant. Today, Mr. Miroslav will speak on how hybrid threats are reshaping the Western Balkans.
Thank you very much. I don't think there will be too much new thing said. Maybe it will be said in different way. We had very fruitful discussion this morning with the young experts from the region, but also from all over the world, particularly on this subject. And I have some slides that I would like to show you just to try to depict what I would like to share and how we analyze the region of Western Balkans. I think that most of the conclusions that I'm going to say is going to can be also portrayed for the Black Sea region as well. So, well, we were constantly speaking about maps. Ambassador Yolevsky had some maps, so I said, why don't I have some? And even the Valentina Superti, she also said, if you would like to understand the Western Balkans, just look at the map. So let's look at the map. And if you see the map, you'll see that it was a long time ago when the Western Balkans was the periphery of EU. It's inside EU, it's in the heart of EU. And if you see the European Union and European Economic Union, it's surrounding the Western Balkans totally, which means that when you impose systems like EES, which is entry and exit system in European Union, you're not only addressing the communication of the region within the EU, but none of us from the Western Balkans can get out of our countries without stepping inside the EU. That gives a perspective of the citizens, what their ambition is. And if you have some of the elements that I've put there, of course there are a lot of them. That is the 80% of export and 60% of import. 3 of them are already NATO countries. Madam Superti has mentioned that 5 have already completely aligned with EU common security foreign policy. And that gives some perspective on why EU enlargement, particularly, which of course I don't like the word enlargement, because if you see the map, actually, with the integration of the Western Balkans, you don't really enlarge Europe. You don't enlarge the dimensions. The dimensions have already suppressed the Western Balkans, and they have gone way far eastern than the Western Balkans. But this is a project of wrapping up the process that has already started. This is the completion of something which has started long ago, probably back in 2000, in the 2000s in Thessaloniki. Anyway, there's something which is constantly being tested by our polling in the region, and these are the 2 elements which easily create a notion of what's happening in the Western Balkans in the population. So on the left side, you have the big support for joining the EU by almost all countries. Only Serbia is under the 50% down on this map. But if you consider how serious the people from the Balkans think that EU is in terms of offering them membership, you see that aside Montenegro, even now Kosovo is below the threshold of 50%, and Albania is just a little bit above 50%. So this gives you a notion that EU has lost its trust and has lost its projection of political power. That, of course, is more a question to be analyzed by the geopolitical analysis and politics. But from our perspective, that's hybrid vulnerability because of the previous map that shows that these countries are pretty much already connected. And if you start the enlargement process discussion, you'll see that enlargement process is not the negotiation process. The enlargement process has started back in the early 2000s with the stabilization and association agreement. That gives these countries from the Western Balkans and from all of the countries are already being integrated into several different types of politics in the EU. That's why they're connected, and that's why the issue of European integration is the main issue where the narratives, hybrid narratives, collide. Now we have also discussed this. I'm just going to reiterate that hybrid threats are almost the same everywhere. These are threats that happen all over the world. The NATO Marco was saying that. But the fertile ground where those hybrid threats actually catch point is what makes the difference. And if you see, this is the Media Literacy Index from 2023, and you can see that in the cluster number 5, which is the lowest point, you can find all of the countries from the Western Balkans and some from Georgia. Even in the segment number 4, you will find also countries from the Western Balkans and the wider Balkan region, wider Black Sea region. Interestingly, you can see that the neighborhood of the Western Balkans and the Black Sea region is also not so much resilient and with a capacity to identify foreign manipulation, which creates problems within the Western Balkans as well when trying to counter foreign malign influence. This is just another one which is from 2026. That's in 3 years. You can see that nothing really too much changed. Well, being now in Italy, let's just say that Italy has moved one cluster upwards, which is something to be mentioned. And but again, even though even that the country is fertile ground, that's not something that the people do not actually understand it. You can see the bar is over 80% of the people from the Western Balkans understand that fake news is a problem in their countries, which is a really highly number. Well, what's disappointing is that maybe half of them don't think that they are the ones who are attacked by it. So, you know, we do understand we have a problem, but we are self-confident that it's not us. And also, one last really important question, which is also being mentioned at the beginning, in the morning session. That is that we all think that Western Balkans is afraid of creating conflict, and people are afraid that there will be a huge disturbance between the countries or inside the countries. That is, the likelihood of armed conflict is actually a little bit above 20% of the problem that the people are saying. But corruption, as you can see, the bar is nearly 90%. And this is something which influences the trends which are creating the environment for hybrid threats. Those trends are on the last slide. It's partial EU enlargement, it's multipolarity in the Western Balkans. Serbia as a factor is a completely different story because we have a complex state which is actually bordering all of the others, and the enabling environment that is governments, state capture, including organized crime and corruption that was previously mentioned. But I will leave this for probably some Q&As. Thank you.
Thank you, Miroslav, for presenting some of the key survey results of perception of people in the Western Balkans related to the EU integrations, but not only, but also stressing the importance of media literacy, which we also discussed in the morning, and how the region is, because of low media literacy, but also other low levels of resiliency against other fields, makes them very vulnerable to manipulation and disinformation. And then this is directly connected with the theme that the next speaker will present. Today with us we have Katarina Klingova. She's a research lead on the Center for Democracy and Resilience at the GlobSec Policy Institute, an international think tank based in Bratislava. Since 2016, Katarina has led research on information operations, hybrid threats, and societal resilience, while also managing cyber building projects on public administration vulnerabilities and strategic communication. Today, she will speak on strengthening Western Balkans political and societal resilience against disinformation and foreign influence operations. Ms. Katarina, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you. Check one. Okay, it's working. Thank you very much for the organizers for the opportunity to be here and share our knowledge. Well, today we're speaking about Western Balkans, but cognitive warfare information operations are not happening in silos, and they're definitely not happening only in Western Balkans. But looking, zooming into the region, what we see is that the vulnerability to information operation and cognitive warfare in the Western Balkans is not just a problem of foreign malinfluence. It's a problem of the vulnerability of the ecosystem of the societies as such. And a lot of things that I'm going to be talking about are actually general to wider societies all around the world. As it was mentioned in the previous panels, the problem with Western Balkan is the democratic backsliding that we've observed. It's a problem of distrust in institutions, problem of lack of interpersonal trust. There's a problem of democratic disillusionment. All those promises that the democracy was supposed to deliver back in 90s, they were never delivered, and people do not trust democratic processes because they keep on voting for populist politicians that promise them everything, but after the elections, the promises are never being delivered. And all this are being utilized by various malign actors to further spread disinformation, polarization within our societies. But what's increasingly problematic, the Kremlin, let's say, playbook is increasingly being used by our domestic actors, including political representatives. And that's not the case only in Western Balkan, but also wider societies. So how do we do that? I think that when it comes to the cognitive security and building resilience, first of all, we have to have a good situational awareness. And how do you do that? You need to do polling. In GlobeSec, since 2016, we've been conducting our own specific public opinion polls titled GlobeSec Trends, because you have, polling like Eurobarometer or NATO does their polling, and that kind of polling is very specific. But what they are not doing in case of our polling is that we poll specific conspiracy theories. We poll very specific disinformation narrative or narrative that we are seeing to be spread by pro-Kremlin or domestic political actors that are spreading disinformation and polarizing the societies even further. And that gives us an understanding of how vulnerable are our societies. Though we do not do polling in the Western Balkans on an annual basis, when we did that, we really found out that narratives, for example, that Russia is the sole defeater of fascism, and a lot of historical narratives are being extremely utilized, especially in Western Balkans and other wider region, to spread pro-Kremlin propaganda. For example, in 2020, 70% of respondents from Serbia believed that Russia is the sole defeater of fascism. In Montenegro, that was 60%. Bulgaria, 58%. This soft power of Slavic brotherhood is another element that is being intensively utilized, not only in Western Balkan region, but wider Slavic countries, to spread that propaganda and cultural interconnectedness between the Russian society and the other societies. So, for example, 89% of Serbs thought that Russia is their traditional Slavic brother. In Montenegro, that was 70%. North Macedonia, 66%. Slovakia, 68%. Majority of the respondents in Bulgaria believe so. So you have this soft power elements, whether it's our lack of history or lack of talk about historical narratives and historical events that are actively being utilized against ourselves. And that's not just something that is, we've collected several years ago, but last year we've conducted public opinion polls in Moldova, and we found out that 44% of Moldovans think that NATO is an aggressive organization and a tool of the US control. 39% of Moldovans thought that the EU membership will threaten their traditional values and sovereignty. So all these things, if are not being, mapped out and not being properly addressed via, for example, strategic communication of national member state, of the respective countries, but also by the European Union, are being bullets in the hands of the Kremlin or various pro-Kremlin actors around the world. And this is not just about Russia, though we are mainly talking about Russia, but also from our public opinion polls, we see that China is utterly, it's not being perceived as a security threat, though very rightly a speaker and the previous panel, one of the speakers in the previous panels, has addressed, that the strategies of the China is completely different from the strategic activities that Russia is doing. Yes, indeed. But what we have been seeing, for example, very intensively during the COVID-19 pandemic, the Chinese have utilized Russian ecosystems, meaning social media platforms, channels, in the Western Balkan region to spread their pro-Chinese narratives as, for example, that the COVID-19 pandemic didn't originate in China, that China was spread, happening more than United States or Ukraine in the region. What we are also increasingly seeing is that China is very much establishing Confucius institutes all around the region, not only Western Balkan, but also in various Western countries, including different type of regions of the world, and is slowly buying up small regional media space in order to stifle and shape the policies, the debates about China, about Taiwan, and thus suppress the freedom of speech about certain policies. So we have an ongoing problem. What we need to know, first of all, is what is the state of play? How widespread is the impact of these information operations that various foreign malign but also domestic actors are spreading, and that have significant impact on our societies. And they do have significant impact on our societies because from our public opinion polls, we see that from 30 to 40% of population on average believes various conspiracy theories. And it can be, something crazy as, that there is a totalitarian world order trying to establish, there are secret societies in our societies trying to establish a totalitarian world order, or perceptions that NATO bases would mean automatic control of, automatic takeover of that particular country, depending on when they're stationed. So people believe various conspiracy theories, and unless we realize that, and unless we include that in our strategic communication, not anti-propaganda narratives, then we can start building that societal resilience and addressing those vulnerable societal groups that believe these specific narratives. Thank you very much, and I'll end my initial remarks here.
Thank you, Katarina. Indeed, building resilience is a very important and key element. And in the past, the international community supported the Western Balkans first to build resiliency against corruption, then against crime, etc. And we are still struggling to have significant impact and reforce in this field. But building resilience against disinformation and foreign influence seems to be even more complex than other fields. And this is why the EU, NATO, but also Western countries in particular, they need to be more present in the area and support civil society organizations, independent media, academia, but also countries in building a whole society approach in building resilience. Now we are moving to the final, but not least presenter, Mr. Michele Empler, who is a PhD candidate at the University of Tuscia and Vice Coordinator at Algo Freedom Society. He's also a Cyber Program Engineer Manager at Leonardo and a lecturer at the University of Tuscia, where he teaches interaction and usability of digital systems and contributes to teaching in informatics. He's currently doing a thesis on changing society, policies, rights, and security, and his research explores the links between cybersecurity, AI governance, and social transformation. Today he will speak about artificial intelligence and the manipulation of democratic information spaces. Michele?
Thank you. Thank you. It's work? Okay. First, I promise, I swear, I'll be quick. So I know it's late and I want to be fast. So I write some notes just to help me to drive in my mind and my work. Let me start where my research began. Sounds doesn't like short, but let me go. A few years ago, I set out to study something that, at the first glance, has nothing to do with my this room. Actually, spoiler, it's not true. Migration, disinformation flowing from the Sahel to Europe, the way human smuggler and their proxies sell impossible journeys to people, to vulnerable young people in the West Africa. So I built a toolkit for this work, a Python crawler, multilingual keyword dictionaries, geolocated access through VPN to network analysis. The point was to map Pascal, who was saying what the whom and how those messages traveled across platforms. And in doing this, I noticed something I did not expect. The smugglers were not just using language. They were using a kind of code, a mix of emoticon, dialect, and Arabian slang. So you must think there is another way to try to hide a message through this particular social, and it can be used to bypass the systems, the security systems, and it can be very, very powerful. It can be a new way to the cryptography. You must keep in your mind that the cryptography, the evolution of cryptography is a complex system, algorithmic system. And in this particular field is the first time we and I have found something weak, little bit spike inside the system, the data set, and it was, I call it migrant code. And I want to share with you today what I have come to believe over the past months. The code is no Sahelian particularity. The same grammar, only with different vocabulary, is operating right now in the information space of the Western Balkans. It's the same. And they know it can be used for every systems to bypass our security system. Even artificial intelligence can be understand there. Just because it's simple emoji and smile, heart, I don't know, both, but together it can be a new kind of code. And why I'm here? I'm here because I use this code for the Balkans, and I wanna play with you, just a joke, and let me give you a case. You know the Romania election, no? In 2024. The Constitutional Court annulled the presidential vote after a virtual no candidate. Georgescu took 22% at the first round. How? To regulate 25,000 TikTok accounts and use it to get a Telegram channel to change the mind of people. You must know when you are looking for something in the internet, and when you look something about information, news inside the internet journal, you are inside actually in an echo chamber, and if you think yes, you find yes. If you think no, you find no. But this is the point. If the new way to understand artificial intelligence put us in a next future, you know, the most part of people think the artificial intelligence is just a chatbot, I don't know, like a ChatGPT, Anthropic, Claude, Gemini, you know? But you must think, actually, there is another C, more deeper. I talk about agent. And if in the next future, in Romanian election, we put one agent for each person, and put this agent that have an history, have a biography, that have friends, chat every day, the system can't catch it. And if this particular agent was inside our echo chamber, it can be used to change our mind, to change the echo chamber. Good. So, time is left. It's late. Okay? Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your attention.
Grazie. Thank you, Michele. We recently did research on smuggling with migrants in the Balkans, and we found your work very useful. In particular, this is very important for the Balkans, but also in Italy, as we have issues with irregular migrants passing through the region. And with this, we concluded the part of the presentation by panelists, and now we have around 10 minutes for the audience and participants to ask questions to the panelists, but also feel free to make your intervention and to have any comment related to this session. So please raise your hand and introduce yourself. Do we have any questions from the audience? Maybe also something that was not addressed in the previous session and you want to comment or... Yes.
I'm the director of the NATO Defense College Foundation. I have a question for the participants, which is, apparently a bit more general. We are now in a political environment which is quite tricky. Some of our major friends is cutting funds exactly on anti-propaganda efforts. Now, one question is money, which of course is difficult to answer. You are not in the financial ministry. But the other is, what are the possible technological solutions to compensate for this low amount of people and money? Because we have this which is ongoing, and of course our adversaries, well, they don't sleep. They have people, they have money, probably less because they are in a war economy, which is small fry for our funds, but if they are cuts, they are cuts. Thank you very much.
So, which from the panel would like to? Yes, Dr. Solomon.
Address this indeed very important question. I mentioned in my presentation that we as NATO need to invoke Article 5 on a 24/7 basis, permanently against propaganda. Well, if not all the allies agree with that, we can do this under the umbrella of the European Union. It is the same. To fight propaganda, whether under the umbrella of NATO, whether under the umbrella of the European Union, but we need a collective effort with a collective frame on how to do this. And I will quote something that we listened to my wife and I had a program, a project in Taiwan, and I is returning from there recently. And we learned something very interesting. In NATO, I was told, I haven't double checked this fact, so don't consider this as a fake news, but I was told by a NATO official, he told me, every 3 months we're producing a booklet saying what are the manipulations, what are the fake news about NATO, what are the FIMI, etc. Every 3 months we have the booklet. Do you know what is the principle in Taiwan? Their principle is called 2-2-2. For each disinformation which comes from China, they need to respond within 2 hours. Within 2 hours, not after 3 months. Within 2 hours, they need to put 2 pictures, because the pictures is the one which is influencing the audience, and the title should be not more than 20 letters in order to read it fast, and the whole text should not be more than 200 letters in order to catch the audience. 2-2-2. This is the Taiwanese principle, and not 3 months as we do with NATO. We had also suggestions which popped up some 10 years ago, which we tried to share with the European Union, because we saw what were the tendencies for relations between Washington and Brussels. What was our suggestion? Well, we have something like 200 embassies all over the world. Why we do not open 50 specialized embassies in the 50 of the United States? 50 embassies to distribute information. This is not something that someone will stop, but the lack of information within the United States about what is transatlantic, what is Europe, etc., creates a vacuum which is very easily filled in by propaganda or malign information. If I'm afraid of something, however, in the future, this is, I'm mostly afraid of the fact that Nigel Farage could become Prime Minister of the UK. He is the person who engineered Brexit, and if such person becomes a leader of one of our strongest allies in the European, on the European continent, I don't think that we are on the right track.
Thank you, Dr. Solomon. I see that we have also another participant.
I have a question about sustainability of access to technology. I mean, I was talking to the Indo-Pacific countries at the end of the year, and in that region, some of the countries, they do not have really the economy to access the best of the breed of technologies, which are, of course, offering that level of assurance. And at the end, they end up trading off between US technology, Chinese technology, and European technology. What is the right balance, and how to make sure that we get access to technology, we don't renounce to it, but at the same time, we get to that level of assurance which manage to contain the risk within acceptable boundaries. I know it's a difficult one, but...
I'm happy to take that one.
Eduardo, yes, please.
It was actually going to be one of my questions to you when you spoke, because you mentioned about choke points, right? That was you intimated that with TSCM, Taiwan, I'm imagining, and the 95% or sometimes 97% semiconductor monopoly they have there. One answer: COTS and dual-use technology, commercial off-the-shelf technology, and dual use. I think the current conflicts that we've seen, Ukraine on one side from the West, and then Iran has showed that asymmetric frugal innovation actually delivers a hell of a punch. So you don't actually need for an initial effect the level of technology, a la Palante style, etc., which many countries can't simply afford. That's one way. Of course, not sustainable in the long term, of course, because you need to then sustain warfare, and you need technology. But another thing that model that Ukraine has showed us is you can offer. There are some very valuable assets that you can offer technology companies in exchange for technology. And again, Palante was a perfect example. They gave it for free in exchange for battle-tested data, which is absolutely pure gold. And that's a way, again, not sustainable. It's a short to medium-term ride, but I think having, in a short answer, frugal innovation, so basically repurposing off-the-shelf technologies or technologies which are used on another, in one sphere for another, that's been perfectly seen as valuable and useful. And the second thing is get creative with what you have. And again, I'll probably mention a country that'll probably land me in trouble, but Israel has shown what happens when you have frugal innovation. And I'm not talking politics, but they went from having absolutely nothing in the 60s and 70s and developing from frugal innovation to disruptive to moonshot, purely from a technology perspective, in many creative ways, leaving aside all the politics.
Thank you. Any other question from participants? Yes, we have one more.
Well, my name is Ciro Maddaloni and I write for Giornale Diplomatico. I don't have actually a question, I have a consideration here. We talk every day, every minute about artificial intelligence, and we forget about talking about natural stupidity. The natural stupidity is the one that brings somebody like Putin to make what he's doing now, to spend 100 million to send a rocket on a garage in Kiev. And the real problem I see today is not about, let's say, what is the cyber threat or the artificial intelligence or the propaganda, but the lack of awareness in the people. People are not informed. People are not informed at all. They just get what is given to them by the people that give them the information. Now, we have the television, we have the school, we have the media, we have everything. Why don't we simply dedicate 1 hour a day, half an hour a day to inform the people? When the people, and I'm talking about politicians, people that are high-ranking in Italy, that it says that Putin had this reason to do what he did in Donbass. Which are these reasons? What are we talking about? Or NATO was a threat for Russia. Where, when, what? How did it happen? People that says that the Russians are fighting with the United States. This was 4 years discussion about. And then the United States retreated with Trump, clearly. Now, with whom is fighting now Russia and Putin? Why don't we tell this a simple statement to the people? Why don't we try to make awareness to the people? That is my point.
Thank you, sir, for your intervention. Yes? Yes. No.
It's, I mean, you put it in the right way that we need to work with our own societies in protecting, we have mentioned this, cognitive sovereignty. The main purpose of the infiltration of manipulation, of foreign interference in information, is actually to influence the decision-making process. It's not only about elections, it's about all decisions that one country sovereignly wants to make, is whether or not they will support Ukraine, whether or not they will support other countries, whether or not they will take more stance on promoting democracy all over the world. So those decisions want to be influenced by hybrid actors who actually don't like the stance that we have. Now, to go back to whether or not we can do that by projecting 1 hour television series, well, actually it's not that simple. The problem is that we need to create citizens which are resilient to being manipulated. And that can be done through education process. And trust me, it is done. Look at the Nordics, look at Finland, look at Sweden, look at Norway. They have done it. They have put it in the educational curriculum. They have put it in their think tank organizations who work with the youngsters. They have created what we call, and constantly repeat it, I know we are going to repeat it again, they managed to create trust and build the whole of society approach in tackling this problem. And that's the only way that we have identified, and we work a lot in trying to identify how we can counter this. This is the only way that we have found to be the most successful. Till now, we didn't find any better. And that is create trust between the civil society and the government. Put hybrid threats, put foreign malign influence outside the normal political competition. Make it a strategic point and start investing as you invest in education, as you invest in judiciary, as you invest in military. You invest billions in military, billions of dollars. Every country invests billions and billions of dollars. Yet when it comes to millions to working in education of the citizen, well, let's see if that's maybe too much. So there is a solution. There is a way. We have constantly repeating it. We have analysis on that. We have reports. And some of the countries are doing it and doing it fine. And we need to just move it forward. And I think that there is, I'm an optimist. Yeah.
Thank you, Miroslav. I would like to give the floor also to one last intervention and question for you, sir. Yes, here.
Can you hear me? Okay. My name is Tullio Morganti. I was a consultant for Central and Eastern Europe for different organizations. So I've seen the different approaches of information sharing with partners from the UN, from the EU, from the World Bank viewpoints. So for 30 more years, I've been doing this type of work. I define myself a child of the Cold War. I was born when the Cold War started. And since I have a very strong memory, and I remember very well how were things going in the 50s, in the 60s, I noticed that here, what we have, we can discuss endlessly about disinformation and other things. But what we are missing is the contents of our civilization, the values of our societies. There is no room given to values and principles in our information systems today. So anybody can say whatever passes through his or her brain. And that is why we have this array, this confusion of what is right, what is true, what is wrong, what is false. Nobody can, I don't think it's right to spread the message of what is right or wrong. But at least what it is true, yes. My biggest amusement in the last months is to listen to the different type of news that we receive from the TV and to spot what is false, what is manipulated, what is twisted as a reality, from domestic affairs to international affairs. The effort that our countries should do and our organizations should do is to strengthen the concept of values and of truth. Now, of course, anybody can manipulate truth, but it is also true that there is a bottom, a basis of truth in whatever we see and whatever we perceive. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for your intervention. I think that this was the perfect remark to end this session. I would like to thank all the panelists for the intervention, but also the audience for their active participation. With this, we conclude this session, and we will continue with the last and final remarks with the conclusion of the session. Thank you.
We have now the concluding remarks made by a representative of the Foreign Affairs Ministry, Luigi Paoli Puccetti, unfortunately, Thomas Botsios could not come because he's still engaged in a meeting at the Prime Minister's office. Thank you for your attention, and in a few moments, the floor will be for Mr. Paolo Puccetti. Abracadabra.
Te l'avevo detto che c'era il cambio pane.
Sì, ma io pensavo che una volta montato fosse tutto pronto.
Thank you very much, Director Politi. Can you hear me? Yes, and sorry for the slight change of program. Dear Ambassador Minuto Rizzo, distinguished guests, and ladies and gentlemen, allow me to convey, first of all, the sincere apologies of and warm regards of Consul Thomas Bozio, who was due to unforeseen working circumstances, was not able to join us today. He asked me to fill in and to express his deep appreciation to the NATO Defense College Foundation for having organized this highly significant conference and for having again gathered such a distinguished assembly of policymakers, experts, and analysts in Rome. As representative of the Italian Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation, it is a privilege to deliver these concluding remarks following such a rich day of discussion. Today's exchange have reaffirmed a fundamental reality that Italy has always had quite clear in its mind, that the Western Balkans and the Black Sea regions are not at the boundaries of Europe, but they rather constitute a strategic crossroads for the entire Euro-Atlantic community. There is indeed an inextricable link for which what happens here in those two areas have a direct impact in the security, in the stability and the future of our entire continent. As we all know, the geopolitical competition has undergone an in-depth transformation. Traditional security challenges are now increasingly intertwined with hybrid threats, particularly within the information domain. In the Western Balkans, institutional vulnerabilities, public trust, and fragile information ecosystems are being systematically exploited by external actors that seek to hinder the region's Euro-Atlantic integration by exacerbating polarization and undermining democratic institutions. Disinformation campaigns have become faster, more sophisticated, also thanks to the resort to artificial intelligence, and consequently increasingly difficult to counter. Public and political perceptions are easily manipulated, and as consequences, civil societies are being marginalized. In this challenging context, strategic communication, media literacy, fact-checking, and cognitive security can no longer be regarded as secondary concerns. There are indispensable components for our collective defense. They are indispensable for the resilience of the EU-Atlantic security architecture. Addressing these challenges requires a stronger, more coordinated EU-NATO approach capable of supporting our Western Balkans partners by enhancing their digital resilience, by safeguarding their critical infrastructures, and by countering foreign interferences. At the same time, democratic resilience cannot be dissociated from political integration. And here comes the first main message that I want to highlight. The most effective response to external influences will remain the completion of the European integration process. For this reason, Italy continues to firmly support the EU enlargement and welcomes the positive momentum emerging across the region. Our country can boast the historical merit of having constantly supported and advocated the EU perspective of the entire region since the beginning, since the well-known Thessaloniki Declaration of 2003, the first official document that recognized that the future of the Western Balkans region lies within the European Union. And here comes the second message I want to highlight, that an incomplete European integration represents a vulnerability that our community can no longer afford. The European integration is a project that will involve all the entire Western Balkans regions, all our partners, and not just few of them. This is a key message that we as Italy have always conveyed in every kind of opportunity. As we conclude this intense and fruitful day of work, we want to reaffirm as Italy our unwavering support and commitment to the stability and common prosperity of the region and of the entire European Union. By investing in democratic resilience and cognitive security, we are not only supporting our partners, but we are also safeguarding and investing in our shared European future. I want to thank you again, and thank you, Ambassador Minutorizzo, and all the organizers and all the participants for your invaluable contributions today. Thank you very much.
So, dear friends, we are at the end of the day. I hope you have enjoyed this afternoon, this long afternoon. For us, for the Foundation, is really, how can I say, very important to try to address strategic issues. That's what we're trying to do. We are not here to become richer or just we want to address things that are relevant. And the Western Balkans are not on the first pages of the newspapers today because there are Iran, etc. You know, I don't have to go into detail. But of course, it remains an important strategic issue. And it is a region we saw from the map that was showed by a speaker before, the speaker from Helsinki, I think. In fact, you have Europe and you have this group of countries there, which outside the European Union. And NATO is partially in and partially out. We know exactly what we are talking about. So we have tried to put the two things together, to try to give the big picture on one side, you know, because you cannot forget the big picture. Also, the impression we have is that these negotiations are probably going to succeed. It looks like it is different from the past. On the other hand, we have those issues that Solomon Passi, with his usual understatement, has told us very eloquently. We have disinformation, we have cognitive problems, we have threats which are real threats. We still have a certain difficulty myself in understanding the real threat, but it is a real threat. And probably we're not well organized yet. And I think that you were right in saying this. So we're not, but you know, the more we talk about that, the more we have a public, serious public, people like you, speaking about that and speaking to others, to friends. Perhaps, I'm sure, little by little, this will become a common sense of action. We work with the college on that. We try to do this, and we can improve it, of course. We are trying to develop a common line of action. And of course, like all these complicated things, it's not easy to do it, but our intention is to continue along this road. And I thank you for your attention for this very long, but not so long after all, half day. And I wish you a good evening. Buonasera a tutti e grazie mille per essere venuti.